anything else you?
No, but thank you very much for your consideration. Appreciate it.
Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to offer comments either for or against? Having seen none, Gene will go off the record. We have to go out.
I'm
No.
good.
That's good. All right. Make a motion. Somebody second the motion.
Go ahead.
Well, Gene will go back on the record, please.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve the appeal of Thomas Gibran on behalf of Transbridge Realty and Contracting Company for dimensional variance to install a fence that exceeds the maximum height on the side and rear of the yard to go to the 7 feet as proposed in his application.
Second.
Mr. Schneck,
Yes.
Mr. Novatnik,
Yes.
Ms. Gardner,
Yes.
Mr. Shantz,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Yes. Your appeal's been granted. Roughly 30 days from now or thereabouts, you'll have a written decision from us. You may want to wait for that written decision. Be comfortable. But anyway, good luck with the project.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next hearing is that of 3055 Linden Street and the appeal of Joseph Negreo.
This is for the property located at 3055 Linden Street. It is the appeal of Joseph Negrero on behalf of Alexandria Swimming Schools LLC, doing business as Goldfish Swim School, for a dimensional variance to exceed the maximum allowable area for wall signs. The total area of all wall signs shall not exceed 50 square feet. There's proposed 4 34 square foot signs totaling 136 square feet. Section 1320.08, little a, LLII, and section 1325.06, and all associated variances, special exceptions, and interpretations. The record lot is 1.4 acres, and it is located in the RR Rural Residential Zoning District.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeiffer. Mr. Negreo, can you tell us when the property was posted?
November 22nd, my father's birthday.
And you were sworn in, am I correct?
Yes,
Okay. All right. Would you like to
Uh,
proceed?
I appreciate you getting me on the agenda tonight, and I promise I'll be brief as I can. I did give Craig the packets showing the property a little bit, and I probably should have marked them as exhibits. I apologize, I didn't do
Okay.
that.
We'll make the submission that you made, applicants one,
Okay.
and then which order should we go? This next?
I want to just start with just to refresh the board's memory on the property. I have
Okay.
three like this that show a before and after of the property.
Okay.
And the first one, if you look at this one here, that is the
Well,
property a few years ago.
Why don't you approach so we can
Sure.
see them better?
You should all have a copy.
And that's part of A1.
Yep.
Okay.
That's the before picture I put there. Just to refresh everybody's memory where we're at. And then there's two pictures I put with it of an aerial photo of the first phase of the property, which is now Lightbridge Academy. And the second phase, which is now Goldfish Swim School, but it's still an empty lot on the picture. And again, this is just to refresh everybody's memory of where we're talking about.
Does everyone have those photos?
Mhm.
Okay.
One comment I want to make, and the reason I make it is because I want the board to understand that we have a lot invested in this property. If you look at the before picture of the property, you had several buildings that were literally falling down. They were all condemned. We tore down all the old buildings and we put an $8 million investment here between the two schools. So, and the only reason I mentioned the money amount is because obviously it's super important to us to make sure that the property looks great, looks nice, looks presentable. And that's really what this is about tonight. The reason I'm here is because I want to work with the signage a little bit, because I think what I want to do is going to make the property look better. If you look at this exhibit, and I'm not sure what you'd want to call this one, this is an aerial photo
Is that in the packet?
that's in the packet.
Yeah, let's make sure everyone has that.
Yep.
Everybody have that one? Okay, Mr. Negro.
Okay, now, although our property is an RR, which means the initial allowance, what we could have put on this property was basically single-family homes, which we know nobody was going to do. If every yellow dot around our properties, which is the two blue dots, is a non-residential use. So although we are RR residential, if you look at the aerial photo, there's nothing RR about this lot. So we fall into that, but I have a feeling it's from this was zoned RR a long time ago. But if you look at the area now, there's nothing RR about it. So I thought that was important as well.
Do you know, are those zoned RR or are they zoned something different?
Most
Now,
of them, okay. The church behind us and Azar Market are both RR. Everything else is commercial.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, if you want to look, I just gave you each a new paper today that shows the zoning map, which I had right in front of me.
All right, so
If you-
we'll mark that A2.
Yep. If you look at the zoning map, where I outlined it in purple, that is our property. Part of our property even touches the commercial.
So the pink is the commercial.
The pink
district.
is the commercial, but we're touching it. As a matter of fact, part of our property does land in the commercial. So we're mostly affecting ourselves here by what we're doing. Okay. I don't know if you want to go over the technicals, but there is an eight or 9 page report here showing the actual signs on the buildings. Would be this one here. This is actually from the sign company.
On that one, I guess the only question I'd have, which might help the board, is tell us what facades that those are on and from where you would be able to see the sign. Because I think the board, it might be important for the board to know why you're proposing, because I think it's
Okay, so
four signs.
let me do that first then.
Yeah,
Okay. The building is a block building, a two-tone block building. And what we're allowed to have, because we're an RR, we're allowed to have up to 50 square feet on the walls, and I'm allowed to have one standalone sign. What I'm proposing tonight is to put 4 small wall signs and to not put a road sign. I won't have the self-standing sign. The reason I want to put the 4 signs is very simple. First of all, well, there's a couple reasons, but one reason is we are on a corner, and obviously it does give the building more visibility to have the signs on the building. Number 2, the building's a little drab. If you look at the pictures I gave along with it, you're going to see the building came out a little more drab than we had hoped. I have 2 children, and my 8-year-old said it looks like a prison. My 11-year-old said it looked like a warehouse. So I'm trying to just dress the building up a little bit. And I'll get back to that a little more. And then the third reason is when we got these approved for the Light Bridge and the Goldfish, our buildings are actually backwards. What you see from Linden Street is actually the back of the buildings. The front of the buildings are on the road that we had to build behind it. Now, if I go following the ordinance, I can't even have a sign at my main entrance. And we built the buildings in a certain fashion so that the city would be happy. They wanted the parking in the back. They wanted the nice tree line. They didn't want to see parking on the road. But because my buildings are backwards now, and because of the ordinance, I can't even have a sign signifying where the front of my entrance is.
If I might, Mr. DeGrayo, and again, explain to us why you put the road around the back.
The city asked us to.
And-
They wanted, I guess it's just the vision that they had for the route there.
It also eliminated drop-offs on Linden Street itself, does it not?
It does, absolutely.
So
But
which-
that honestly was not the main reason it done. When we went into preliminary conversations with the city, with Tracy, everybody, they had a vision that they just didn't want a parking lot there alongside the road. They wanted And if you look at our buildings, we actually spent the extra money to have dual facade buildings. So if you look at the back of Lightbridge, we spent a lot of extra money. So even though it's the back of the building, it looks like the front of the building. We're doing the same thing with the Goldfish. Because, I mean, we want it to look nice.
Thank you.
But yeah, thank you. If I do have 4 pictures of the Lightbridge Academy here, which is on, it's not the same lot. It's on the same connecting lot. On this building, and I don't know if what you want to call this one, there's 4 pictures of the Lightbridge. I do have a sign on each side on all 4 sides of the building. And obviously, yes, it's great for our marketing and it looks nice. But by putting the 4 signs, I was able to not put a road sign, which I think looks nicer. Instead of having some big sign on the road, I have 4 signs on the building. And if you look at them on the building, it kind of goes with the building. It's colorful. It is a school for little kids. We wanted some color on the building, and we felt that our 4 signs helped do that because they are so colorful. And again, it was by doing that, we were able to not put the street sign. So the same thing with the Goldfish applies. What I did, I took a picture this morning. If you look at this one here, I don't know what you want to exhibit that one. It's with the 2 different pictures.
Do we already have that?
I just gave it to you now.
You did.
Okay, we'll make that A3. Before you go on, can I ask one question? Were the 4 signs permitted on Lightbridge?
I can tell you exactly what happened with that. When the plans went in to planning, the 4 signs were on the building, were on the plans. The plans were approved with the 4 signs. I think at the time I got the approval for 2 reasons. Number 1, it was approved with the 4 signs. And number 2, our property was touching the commercial. We did have a part of it that was commercial. So I think we were able to do it for that reason. Okay, so if you look at the one from this morning, that's the top picture is a picture of our building this morning. The bottom picture is a Goldfish Swim School in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I only showed that to, you have the same kind of drab looking building, but you have a nice colorful blue and orange with bubbles and a goldfish. And I just think that kind of breaks up the monotony of all that block a little bit. But if you look at the other pictures of our school, I just think instead of putting 150 square foot sign and a street sign, I think being able to put 4 small signs on the building with the multiple colors on it, it's just going to help dress it. We're going to try to dress it up with the windows a little bit too. And I don't know if anybody's been by, but we've landscaped the building now already. So it is starting to look a little nicer. But honestly, I do think the building needs some color. And that's why I'm here asking. I would like to not put the street sign, put the 4 signs. If you look at from the sign company, it'll show you all 4 sides of the building. And if you look at the size of my signs in relationship to the size of the building, you can see that I'm not exactly asking for billboards here. There are 4 small signs. The signs are 11 feet long, 11 feet 6 on a 78-foot wall and 11'6" on a 116-foot wall. So again, I'm not asking for billboards here. I'm just trying to break up the monotony of the block a little bit. Okay, and the last point I'm going to make, being that we're on the corner, obviously on the 2 corners, I'd like to have a sign, one on Johnson, one on Makeda. Of course, I'd like to have one at my main entrance, which is actually the back of the building. But of course, I'd like to have a sign there. And then on the 4th side, that's facing our property anyway, Lightbridge Academy. So we're the ones looking at it. So that's where I'm at tonight.
Are the lights on a timer? I see they're lighted signs internally illuminated. Are they on a timer or will they be 24/7?
That's a good question. The ones at Lightbridge, I believe, are on. That's a very good question. The ones at Lightbridge, I believe, are on till about 2 o'clock in the morning. But I mean, I don't mind putting a restriction on that also. I mean, we're open till, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 o'clock at night. Maybe like at 10 o'clock, they turn off or something.
Are the signs bright enough that they might shine into the windows of the apartments across the street?
Like I said, they're smaller than the signs that I have on Lightbridge. And if they're not, if those lights aren't shining, our lights aren't going to be shining on them either. And again, even if I could only have one sign, I could have it on that wall anyway. So the other ones don't face any. One faces the church, which is real far. One faces Azar. One faces us at Lightbridge. So it's really not going to change anybody's comfort with lighting, I should say.
Is this a logo that Goldfish uses?
It is
That
the logo, yes. And honestly, not to sound corny, but I think the sign is very cute, and I just think it's going to help dress up the building. That's why I included that picture of the one from Charlotte. You can see how nice it looks on there, as opposed to just being a gray block wall. I wish I could put much bigger signs, but I'm not going to push my luck.
Any other questions from members of the board?
Are the signs help to actually, do they actually help to direct people as to where to enter and exit the building?
No, it's just for aesthetics. Like I said, if this is rejected tonight, then I have to go back to the standalone sign. But I think aesthetically, this is much more pleasing, especially since the Lightbridge has the exact same thing next door.
What did you say was the permitted square foot of the freestanding sign?
I believe it's comes out to about 4x8, so it's fairly small. We have the same thing at the Alexandria Manor down on Oakland and Linden. We were very restricted on our signage there because also it was RR.
Right.
But I think it's about like a 4x8, something like that, 5x8. I don't remember the exact, but I know it's around that size. But that would also be lighted.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the zoning officer can.
Certainly. So for permitted commercial uses in the residential district, you can have one freestanding sign not to exceed 8 square feet.
Oh,
Yeah, it's on page 121, number 13.
8 square feet. So that would be like 2 by 4.
all right. So the property would be allowed 58 square feet of commercial signage, 50 between the wall sign plus the 8.
Correct.
Okay. Is there any bonus? Well, let me ask you this. In the commercial district that Mr. Negreo said is nearby, what would have been allowed?
Are you asking for wall signs, freestanding signs,
So
or
yeah,
both?
both. Just to know what the total square footage of a business would be 1 block away.
So the calculation for the freestanding sign is 1 square foot for each 2 linear feet of lot frontage, or 50 square feet total,
Okay.
whichever is smaller. And then the calculation for wall signs, which also include projecting signs and window signs, is no more than 20% of the total facade area for which they're attached.
Oh, okay. And all right. So that's, I think your percentage is, at least based upon the number you gave, is a couple of percent. In other
I'm
words,
not sure.
21, wouldn't it be the height, 21 times 78?
I know that all the signs around us, including Walgreens and Learning Experience,
Would be much
their
bigger.
signs are humongous.
Okay, comparatively.
So what I'm looking to do is still nothing compared to what's around me.
Okay.
One last go round on the board. Any questions from members of the audience? Is anyone in the audience wishing to testify either in opposition or in support of this appeal? If not, Mr. Negreo, did you have any final comments you wanted to make?
No, I just appreciate you taking your time to talk to me, and I'm hoping for the best here, because I do think the building is going to look a lot nicer with a little bit of color on it.
All right, thank you. Gene, we're going to go off the record. Do we need to go outside?
I don't know.
So just so you know.
Let's come on down, Pete. Yeah, did you hear what?
Based upon just so you know, context, one block down on. So that means
Make a motion in a second. Yeah, I'll do it. All right, Gene, we'll go back on the record, please.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to make a motion to approve the appeal of Joseph Negreo on behalf of Alexandria Swimming Schools LLC, trading as Goldfish Swim School, for the dimensional variance to exceed the maximum allowable area for wall signs, as is written in his application.
And Mr. Shantz, would that be conditioned upon there being no freestanding sign?
Correct. With one condition, of course, no freestanding sign.
May we have a second, please?
I'll second.
Mr. Price?
Mr. Schneck,
Yes.
Mr. Novatnik,
Yes.
Ms. Gardner,
Yes,
Mr. Shantz.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzpatrick.
Yes. Your appeal's been granted. Again, I would just caution, it'll take us, we have up to 30 days, I guess, to get you a written appeal. But anyway, good luck with the
Great,
project.
thank you.
So I
I don't know why you'd mess up a nice looking prison or warehouse by putting color on it.
Is-
My daughter said that I believe.
is the whole.
Probably a smart man to listen to your daughter.
Dug for the pool inside that building?
Yeah.
I missed the whole being dug out.
Yeah, they're supposed to pour the floor in this week. We're trying, we'll get there.
And is it only for local people
Little kids, the pool's only 4'3",
Okay.
deepest part of it,
And we,
up to 12
are you gonna
years,
have lessons on weekends?
half days on weekends.
Okay.
I think it's supposed to be on weekends.
Okay.
It's good. Wait till you see it. Honestly, it's really gonna be something.
Okay,
Thank you.
good luck.
See you later.
Wow.
Yeah, man, I'll tell you. Yeah. Oops.
While they're setting up, do you want me to read the case?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? So this is the appeal of 830 13th Avenue. Mr. Piper, if you give us the facts of the case, please.
Certainly, the parcel is located at 830 13th Avenue. It's the appeal of Abraham Attia on behalf of Pennsylvania Venture Capital, Inc. for a use variance to convert an existing structure into 67 dwelling units, 66 efficiency apartments, and one-bedroom apartment, and variances to decrease the minimum required off-street parking spaces, 118 required, 67 proposed, to decrease the minimum distance between parking spaces in any multifamily dwelling, 15-foot minimum separation distance, plus or minus 14 feet, plus or minus 4 feet, and 0 feet proposed, and to exceed the maximum number of parking spaces within any one lot, maximum 40 spaces permitted, 46 proposed, sections 1305.01A, 1319.01A1II, 1322.03 LL5I, 1322.03 LL5II, 1325.06, and all associated variances, special exceptions, and interpretations. The record lot is 1.27 acres, and it is located in the LI Light Industrial Zoning District.
Thank you, Mr. Piper. And as we're finishing the setup here, Attorney Preston, can you tell us when the property was posted?
Yes, Gene, when was the property posted?
It was posted on Friday, November 22nd.
All right. take your time on this setup. Not that we're rushing everything.
Why don't we, while we're doing that, if, it looks like we have counsel at our, other than the applicant counsel table, and if they could introduce themselves, enter their appearance, and tell us who they each represent.
Michael Ricciuti, law firm Colton Siliot, Brendan Ricciuti on behalf of Jill and Pete Russ, they're the owners of 913th Avenue and 902 14th Avenue.
913th Avenue and 902 14th Avenue. And that's, the last name's Rust.
My name is Mark Fisher. I represent Francesca, F-R-A-N-C-E-S-C-A Associates LLC. They are the owners of budding property known as 850 to 870 13th Avenue.
Okay.
I'm John DePasquale with the firm Drinker Biddle and Reed, and I'm representing 860 14th Avenue Irrevocable Trust. The address is 860 14th Avenue, the abutting property to the west.
You're gonna have to be.
Can you spell your last name?
Yeah, sure.
Step back a little bit.
DIPASQUALE.
So you gotta move back.
Is the P capital or lowercase?
It is capital. Thanks.
All right.
Can we see this if we move this all back?
Think so? As long as you don't make it turn into a house of cards that all comes down around you.
That's good. That's good.
That's fine. It's fine here.
Yeah, just so you can see him.
I might encourage anyone who's interested, sitting in the audience, to move to one of the sides so you can see the exhibits.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys are welcome to move your chairs. You're welcome to stand up and
Yeah.
move around. We're not offended in any way.
Yeah, why don't you take a good look here? One must be on the side of a hill. There we go. Okay, Attorney Preston, it looks like we're all set up and ready to go here.
Okay, thank you, and good evening. Mr. Pfeiffer has read the appeal into the record, so we're here for a particular property. Several variances are in play, and one is probably the most important or the most critical would be the use variance. And so I have several witnesses here to talk about that this evening. Prior to doing that, I'm going to hand up a packet, and then after it's authenticated, if I may.
Sure.
Yes. Do you have enough copies for the other council, or at least,
think I
at least for them to share? Because we usually don't have that many at the table, so.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We're marking this too.
Thank you.
He didn't make the. I do it for the applicants. It's still part of the record technically. but-
What I've handed up is a packet of 27 photographs. They're marked in the bottom center of each page, has a page number on it, just for reference. I would just ask that it be marked collectively as A1,
And then each
Got it.
page is A1, page 1,
Yep,
page 2.
you got it.
Okay.
okay? And my first witness is going to be referring to those photographs, and my first witness is going to be Gene Berg with Galk Architects. Gene, you've been sworn, is that correct?
That is correct.
What do you do? Well, why don't you spell your name for the record, please?
It is EUGENE Berg, B-E-R-G, Jr., and I work for Gauck Architects, G-O-U-C-K
Okay.
Architects,
Let me hand you-
1304 Hamilton Street in Allentown.
I'm going to hand you a document. Take a look at that. Tell me if you recognize that.
Yes, that's my curriculum vitae.
Copy to that file, mate.
Will this be A2?
Yeah, I'd ask this be marked as A2. Okay, Gene, with reference to A2, would you tell us a little bit about your training and background, please?
Yes, I'm a registered architect in Pennsylvania and in New Jersey. I have a 5-year Bachelor of Architecture degree from Virginia Tech, which I received in 1993. And I have been working for a variety of architects, Spillman Farmer Architects, Wilbur Klein, Geho Architects, which then became Gauck Architects since 1994. So.
And you've testified as an expert in the area of architecture before, is that correct?
Yes, I have.
In fact, you've testified in front of this board, I believe, as an expert in architecture.
Yes.
You familiar with the project that's being presented to the board this evening?
Yes,
In fact, you've been involved in doing a lot of the research for this project.
that is correct.
And are you familiar with the zoning ordinance for the city of Bethlehem, at least to the extent that it affects this application?
Yes.
I would ask that that Mr. Berg be allowed to testify as an expert in the area of architecture.
Does anybody have cross on his qualifications, or otherwise the board will accept him?
Yeah,
as an-
without objection, we'll accept.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, he's qualified as
Okay, thank
in
you.
architecture.
Let's just give a quick overview of what we're seeking here. Where is, excuse me, where is the property, the subject property? Where is it located?
That is located at 830 13th Avenue.
And what currently exists on the site?
There is an existing 3-story building, which is an old industrial building, which was originally used for the synthetic thread company. It has wood floors and low ceiling heights underneath existing beams and underneath existing sprinkler pipes.
And we're asking that we be allowed to use that building as what?
For 67 apartments, that would be 66 studio apartments and one bedroom.
And what is a studio apartment?
Studio apartment is basically one room that you enter into that is all open. It doesn't have a separate bedroom.
I think that's important. We're going to, especially when we start talking about parking calculations. So there's no bedroom?
Yes,
Flesh that out a little bit. That might
correct.
seem a
Yeah.
little odd or
So
something.
it's like a loft style apartment, which is open, and so there's not a separate bedroom. You enter into the space and you have an open kitchen, dining, living area, and you sleep all in that one. It's all one large room, which has nice light coming from the original windows of the building.
Okay, now let's go back and let's use A1. You have a copy of that there? That would be the packet of photos.
Yes.
Okay, and you're familiar with these?
Yes.
I believe you took these, did you not?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, very good. Let's go down through here quickly. We don't want to waste a lot of time, but just to give the board a feel for what's there. What does photograph number 1 represent?
The first photograph is taken from the Route 378 side of the building, looking at the 378 elevation.
Okay,
which
and
is from
that's the-
southeast.
That's up on the easel, that photograph, is that correct?
Yes, it is one of the photos on the easel.
Okay, let's keep going. Number 2.
Number 2 is a view of the subject building, which is taken from the northwest corner, which is when you approach the site from Gary Street, you see the loading dock off to the left-hand side and some doors that enter into the building there.
Okay, and that's pretty much depicts the exterior of the building.
That's correct.
Let's go down and
let's look at the next set. This is how, I believe this is how you get to the building. Is that right?
That is correct. This is 14th Avenue, taken from Union Boulevard, which is in a residential neighborhood. It is the only way to get to this island of the city, which is surrounded by Route 378 to the south in a loop and an abandoned railroad track on the north. This is the only way to get access to the site, which is through the residential neighborhood and crossing over the 14th Avenue overpass of Route 378.
That gets you to the site.
That's correct. There's no stoplight at this intersection. It's just a stop sign.
Okay, let's go. Let's flip through them. Then again, just identify what the photo is, please. Number
Again,
4.
Again, this is looking from 14th Avenue, looking back towards the intersection of Union Boulevard.
Okay, number 5.
Number 5 is taken from across the street on Union Boulevard with a group of school kids who are crossing this 14th Avenue, where tractor trailers could potentially need to turn out onto Union Boulevard.
That's if they needed to get to the site.
If they needed to get to the site, that's
They would
correct.
have to go that way. Is
They
that
would have to go that way. It's the only way in.
Number
and out.
6. Now let's go to the building itself. Number 6, what are we looking at?
Number 6 is the east elevation of the building.
Okay. Number 7.
7 is the north elevation of the building.
Okay. Number 8. What's number 8?
Number 8 is a portion of the building that we intend to demolish. Those two, what look like loading docks, are really just garages. They do not lead on into the rest of the building.
So you're talking about the structure that is red.
The structure that is red, those two overhead doors
Is
there
it-
are not loading docks.
Is it attached or detached from the main building?
It is attached to the main building, but there are block walls that separate it from the rest of the building.
And that's coming down?
That is coming down.
Number 9?
Number 9 is a photograph which is taken a little bit more distant, which is looking at the same area of the building and the rest of the 3-story building off to the right. You can see there's a macadam driveway that is kind of diagonally crossing the site in the foreground, and that is an easement, to a driveway easement, which offers access to Francesca, which is to the east of the property.
Okay, so in other words, there's an easement over the subject property
That is correct.
that's used by an adjoiner to get to their property. Is that
Mhm.
correct?
Another thing you'll note about this photograph is that the grades never match the floor lines of the building when you go around the building. So the lowest level there, it ramps down to get into the lower level. Then the grades rise as they go around towards the Route 378 side of the building, and they get higher so that they, again, do not align with the lower level, nor do they align with the first floor. They're either higher than the first floor or lower than the first floor, but none of the grades around the building ever align with one of the floor lines,
Okay.
which makes it difficult for loading in and out of the building. There's only one loading dock.
In fact, let's go to number 10. I think, is that the loading dock you're talking about?
That is the loading dock.
No, you said the loading dock. Is that the only one?
That's the only one.
Let's go to number 11.
That's another view of that loading dock, which has, you can back up a truck in 2 different directions up to that loading dock. There are dock bumpers on 2 sides.
When this picture is taken, we're just generally from the point of view of the perspective of the photographer, would I be in that easement or near that easement?
That's correct. Standing in the easement to take that photograph. Correct.
Number 12.
Number 12 is a view from 13th Avenue looking towards the east on the north side of the building. And again, you can see the loading dock on the right-hand side.
And
you
that's
see
the easement that goes through
See the
there?
driveway easement going through, and then off just to the left of that, there is almost like a creek that flows down through that area, which is a drainage runoff, and but it continuously flows.
And that's the red building that's going to be removed?
The red building that's going to be removed, you can see that in the distance. Yes,
13, that's,
it's a view of the looking out of the windows of the upper floor of the roofs of the building, which need to be replaced, when there's a good use for the building.
okay. Number 14.
Number 14 is a picture taken from 13th Avenue, looking at the west side of the building, and there's a man door there that comes into the first floor, and you see the side of the loading docks to the left.
15.
That is showing a view from the northeast of the building.
16.
16 is on the east elevation of the building.
Okay, now let's move inside. Go to number 17. What are we looking at in photo number 17?
Number 17, you're looking at the typical construction of the building, which consists of wood planks that sit on top of exposed steel beams that frame into steel girders. And the clearance from the wood floor up to the underside of the big steel girder is 8 feet 11 inches. And then we have sprinkler pipes, which you see that are hanging underneath, sprinkler mains that hang underneath those steel girders. So typical clearances to the underside of the sprinkler pipes are 7 feet 6.5 inches. There's even one location on the basement level of the building where you ramp down into the building at one of the overhead doors where you have 6 feet 6 inches of clearance to a sprinkler main.
18?
18 is a photograph of some of the windowsills along the Route 378 side. I think it got a little blackened out.
Yeah. 19.
19, that photograph is that's a photograph along the Route 378 side of the building, and the rainwater leaders that come from the roof are exiting the building a few feet above the floor elevation, because that is matching that gives you an idea of how high the grade is above the floor line at that one particular location on the Route 378 side, the south side of the
Floor
building.
leaders coming out at grade.
Yeah, the rainwater conductor, that pipe is coming out at grade.
Okay. Number 20?
Number 20 is another photograph which was taken in the lower level, which is showing the steel beams and girders and ductwork with and sprinkler pipes that all have low clearances underneath them, 6 feet 6 at the lowest and 7 feet 6 very commonly.
21.
21 is showing the tape measure showing, in this case, 7 feet 9 to the underside of some of the utilities in the building.
Photo number 22. What does that show?
That is showing the lower level of the building, the concrete slabs on grade with the steel columns and some wood columns, low headroom clearances that are common throughout the entire building.
23.
23 is showing more ductwork and in the basement level of the building, the lower level of the building.
24.
24 is more photographs of that portion of the building, which is on the northeast side of the building.
25.
25 is photographs, from the looking towards the west, through the existing building, again showing low headrooms.
And 26.
26 shows that, here's a situation where there's a plywood boarded up doorway that leads on into the overhead door that leads into this lower level. And again, since the grades don't match, they've bulldozed some gravel in order to ramp up from the basement floor to get out to grade.
Okay, and finally, photo number 27. What does that show?
That's also a photograph, showing the structure and low headroom clearances.
Okay, and you took that photograph as well.
I took them all.
Okay, very good. So you're familiar with the property,
Yes, I am.
and I think you testified earlier that you were familiar with the zoning ordinance as it affects this appeal. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in particular, definitions. Let me look here. Article 1305, I believe.
Yes.
Is the section of the zoning ordinance that lists uses that would be permitted at the site. First of all, what site what is the zoning classification?
It is LI,
Which is what, light industrial?
I think limited industrial.
Limited industrial? Okay, and so the way the ordinance worked as a chart has columns, it shows all the uses that are permitted.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Mhm.
And you looked at this at my direction to survey these uses and see what would be suitable for the property. Is that correct?
Correct.
And did you find any in here for which the property would be suitable?
No.
Some of them I think are self-evident. Let's see, auto body, well, an animal cemetery. Is that one that's, an animal cemetery. I think that's animal shelter.
There's no open area. Animal shelter, the building is too large for an animal shelter. There's no good place for dog runs. The highway's right next to it.
Sure. What about a conference center or an exposition center? You think it would be?
we don't have enough parking on the site for a conference center or performing arts center, and the ceiling heights are low, and the building is not an auditorium. It's not an arena. It's not a performing arts center. It's not an exhibition trade show center. It's the site is very difficult to find. It's difficult to have any sort of commercial use on this site because people don't drive through here. It's a dead-end street. You have to cross a dead-end 14th Avenue overpass in order to get back into this area.
So it's your opinion that the building as it sits and as you described in the photographs and as we're going to describe further when we look at the site plans, that site is really not particularly suitable for any of these uses here. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I would ask the board to take judicial notice of its prior decision, granting a use variance pretty much for the same use that was here. And which I have a copy of that. I'm going to mark that as A3. Now, Gene, you were around at the time of this prior zoning decision, were you not?
Presumably.
Remember this?
I was actually not at the prior zoning decision. Abe had his own staff at that point in time.
Okay, well,
Mhm.
this is dated 2010.
Mhm.
Are you familiar, or are you aware if there's been any significant changes made to the building since 2010?
The owner has attempted to develop the property for one of the permitted uses, which is self-storage, and he has constructed metal storage units on the entire first floor of the building and has had a great amount of difficulty in leasing many, if any, of them.
Oh, I think we already have
I
this.
think we have.
Yeah.
The storage use that you just spoke of, in fact, I think in the photographs, when we look at the exterior, there's a sign up there that says what, storage?
Yes,
Something that's,
$49.
okay.
Mhm.
And how's that working out?
It is not working well at all for the owner. Abatia has not leased many of the spaces. That's the reason why he's here before the board.
Well, let's talk about that. In terms of accessibility, in terms of storage units, can you drive up to the units there?
No, you cannot. They are inside the building.
Let me do this then. We're going to mark this as I have a photograph that I'm going to mark as A4. Take a look at that.
Yes, that is a photograph of one of the corridors on the first floor, and looking down and seeing the storage units.
Okay, and you're familiar with that? I'm going to have another photograph that I'm going to mark as A5. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
So let me do this here. Probably this one would be better. Okay. This is A4. Okay, Gene, I've given you A4. What does A4 show?
A4 is showing one of the corridors in the storage unit area on the first floor of the building. And it's showing one of the, a lot of open doors because the storage units are not occupied.
How do you get to these units?
You need to park your car outside on 13th Avenue, and then you need to figure out a way of carrying your stuff in. You could, I guess if you had a truck, you could back up to the loading dock, but you still have got to carry the items that you want to put into storage several hundred feet before you can get them into your storage unit. So you better bring along some sort of cart or something to wheel it in there. It's not very convenient.
Here's a photo I'm going to mark as A5. And what does that show?
That's showing one of the doors of one of the storage units. They're metal storage units that are constructed inside the building. They're the standard sizes, the 5x5s, 5x10s.
Do you have any idea how long the owner has been attempting to get this storage unit off the ground?
I think that the storage units have been constructed for, at least 2 years, I'd say.
Well, we'll have some testimony on that, hopefully, if the owner gets here from Whitehall Township, but in your opinion, your professional opinion, is the building suitable for that particular use, the storage, self-storage use?
No, and the reason, what the fact that the owner cannot rent any of the units is testament to the fact that it's not well suited for that use. It's difficult for people to get their belongings and move them and carry them into the building.
What is, it's often referred to as the silk mill, is it not? Or is it?
It was called a synthetic thread.
Okay, what is there, what does that mean? Do you know? What are they talking about? How was it used?
It was used as a manufacturing building for thread, dyeing of thread.
Okay.
Probably polyester, synthetic.
Does that explain some of the nuances of the structure itself?
The thread's pretty small, so you can do it in a building that, it's building that has lower ceiling heights.
Are we talking pre-OSHA or what here?
The first part of the building was constructed in 1920, and then there were additions made after that.
You have a proposal to adapt this particular building, is that correct?
Yes.
And that's what we're here for this evening.
Yes.
Have you prepared any exhibits that would be able to explain what the building would look like?
We have exhibits in the front. Yes.
Now, we're up to A5, I believe, which is the A4 and 5 for storage units. Hold on for a second, Gene. So I'm going to ask that this next drawing be marked as A6. Gene, go ahead. What is A6?
You want to start with on the bottom right?
Whichever you think is going to be the easiest way to explain what it is that you want to have happen here.
Well, we'll start with the rendering on the top, which is just a colored in perspective view of the first corner of the building that you approach when you drive in along Gary Street. So you come 14th Avenue, you make a right on Gary Street, go past Century Kitchens on the right-hand side, and then you come diagonally. This glass entrance area was previously the loading dock. So on this upper right rendering, you can see the building with renovated with new windows that take the place of these old single pane ribbon windows, and the building is cleaned up. There's going to be a passive recreation area about 15 feet deep that is going to be all along this portion of the south or north elevation of the building, just to the left of the entrance. The board right underneath this is showing a photograph of the building taken from the same perspective as
And the photograph underneath, that was included in the packet of photos, was it not?
that is correct.
Is there a proposed layout for this particular?
Yes, there is. We have several boards which show the studio apartments that are
Hey, Gene,
double loaded.
let me do this first. I have here a packet that has 3 sheets in it.
Yes.
You're familiar with that?
Yes.
I'm going to ask that this be marked collectively as A7.
Okay.
And for the record, what is A7?
A7 are proposed floor plans for renovation of the building into 67 apartments.
Okay.
66 studios plus one bedroom.
And there's 3 sheets?
That is correct.
And these, the boards that you have here that you're going to present to the board and to the audience is the same information that's on here, is that correct?
That is correct.
And what I'm going to do for the board convenience, I'm going to mark these drawings here as A7. Just give me a second to hand these around, and then you can use those.
Gene, can you do me a favor? That microphone pops right off. Could you just use that when you talk, please? Thank you.
Mr. Preston? Yes. Give me two.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry. Next to last page.
Right, so.
Okay, Gene, I've handed up to the board and to opposing counsel the A7, 3 sheets showing the floor plans. So why don't you go ahead and explain to the board what's happening here?
Okay, so on the first floor plan, there, in the upper left-hand corner of the floor plan, there is an entrance ramp that comes up to the prior loading dock is the new entrance into the building, and there's a lobby at that location. Then we have a corridor that runs down the middle of the building throughout the entire building that creates it's a double loaded corridor, and then based upon the structural bay spacing of the steel beams and columns, there's one apartment per structural bay, and and we have this double loaded corridor. From that corridor, you can there are apartments on each side. Studio apartments. So as you enter into each studio apartment, you enter kind of through a kitchen area. There's a bathroom on the right-hand side, and as you walk further into the apartment, then you have your living, sleeping area, which is beyond, and a bank of closets off to one side of that. There are so each floor has a similar layout of a double loaded corridor that runs down the middle of the building, with with studio apartments lined up on each side. One of the apartments that is on the second floor in this southeast corner then is a 1-bedroom apartment, and that's only because of the configuration of the space that is left over. Where the corridor makes its bend, there's not enough space to develop a studio apartment out of this last room, so it just becomes a 1-bedroom to the adjacent apartment. And down on the lower level, there are a limited number of studio apartments there, which are all facing towards the north, towards the future green passive recreation park area, which is going to be on the north portion of this left-hand area of the building.
And what's involved in pulling all that off? What type of undertaking is this in terms of the existing structure?
The existing structure is going to be cleaned up. The old single pane glass windows would be removed. We would stud in those openings and add new thermal pane windows. The building would be insulated. Probably get a new roof. We would we're going to be doing, we're going to pave some of the gravel areas and stripe parking lot lines on those spaces. And then we, construct new partitions, and 1-hour rated partitions that separate each of the units, and just finish the interior of the building.
And it would be dedicated entirely to residential uses.
That's correct.
Gene, I'm gonna hand you an aerial photograph. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Just what is it, first of all?
It is an aerial photograph of the site, which shows Route 378 looping around the south side of the site. The interchange that you see on the right-hand side is the 8th Avenue exit off of Route 378, and nestled right in there is Nitchman Middle School, and then we have Union Boulevard shown to the south. Yep.
Will this be A8?
That would be A8, yes.
You pick which way.
I'm sorry. I should have, that was my fault. I should have gotten that out there sooner. So with respect to A8, the site is I see what looks like an industrial section.
Yes.
Okay. Could you point out, is our site the one that's I highlighted in yellow? Is that correct?
Our site is highlighted in yellow right here.
Okay. And how do you get there? Explain that again.
To
How
get
do you get here? How do you access this?
to get to the site, you must drive through a residential neighborhood. You know, if you're coming from Route 378 north, for example, you get off at the 8th Avenue exit. You make a right-hand turn past Nitchman Middle School. You make another right-hand turn down Union Boulevard, which again goes past the front side of the Nitchman Middle School property. And you drive through a residential neighborhood until you get up to 14th Avenue. And the only way to get back in here is to make a right on 14th Avenue and cross an overpass bridge that goes over Route 378 back into here. You come back to Gary Street, you make a hard right-hand turn there on a skinny street, and then that leads back on into the site right here.
Now, Gene, would you put up the site plan? Is that it on the end there?
The site plan's on the end, yes.
Okay, well then before we do that, this site plan was drawn by our engineer, Sue Kendall, who can testify later, but just to keep things moving, I'm going to introduce it now with the board's permission.
Fine with the board.
Yep.
Site plan's on this left easel on the top.
Okay, hold on. I want to get it in front of them before you start talking about it. Thank you. Okay, Gene, you've seen this before, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and we're marking it as A9. It's identified as Synthetic Thread Apartments Site Plan CS1. What's that drawing intended to show?
That drawing shows the footprint of the existing building here, which is marked Building A and Building B. The Building A is the 3-story portion of the building. Building B, which is on the east side, the right-hand side of the plan, the site plan, that is a 2-story portion of the building. Building C is a 1-story portion of the building, 5,724 square feet. That portion is going to be demolished to make way for some more parking in this area. You see Gary Street on the upper left, which is the only way to get into the property. And then when you get to 13th Avenue, you make a right-hand turn and then left into the property. The easement comes diagonally across the property. It is the paved driveway that you saw in the photographs earlier. It is an existing 18-foot wide easement that we are proposing to widen to 25 feet so that it's more passable for two-way traffic. And that easement cuts diagonally through the site, and then it follows the north property line and provides access to Francesca Associates at 850 13th Avenue. It provides access to one property, which is beyond our property, one property on the east of our property.
I want to talk about the variances that we're requesting here. Obviously, the use variance, I think you've covered most of that. Is there anything else you would like to say about that in terms of the suitability of the building?
The difficulty with this building is its low ceiling heights and its wood floors. When it comes down to manufacturing uses of any sort, and storage uses of any sort, commercial uses of any sort. Well, the manufacturing uses, they don't want buildings that have 6 feet 6 clear to the underside of sprinkler pipes, or 7 feet 6 clear. And that's not usable for people who do manufacturing. They want buildings that have tall ceiling heights so that they can fit industrial equipment in. And that usually means, a minimum of 25 feet clear. And when it comes down to warehousing, you see distribution done by Amazon and these others. The tilt-up concrete construction, you see that going in alongside the highways everywhere. 50 feet tall, clear to the underside of the bar joist so they can do high-piled storage. It's not efficient to move forklifts around in a building and have them have to go up and down freight elevators and then nonetheless have wood floors, that they are going to be crossing in order to have, that they can't store anything with the low ceiling height. It's inefficient. Also, when there is when you have companies who are interested in manufacturing and warehousing and storage, they want to be very convenient to the highway. It would be ideal if they're in an industrial park, which is right at the interchange, and the tractor trailers don't need to stop at an intersection in a residential neighborhood at where 14th Avenue comes out to Union Boulevard, where there's no stoplight, and kids are crossing, who are mobs of kids who have just left walking home from Nitchman Middle School, have got to cross. They walk home through this neighborhood and they're crossing the street, and then you got to deal with tractor trailers trying to get out in the traffic, and Union Boulevard is fairly busy as it is, and you've got kids crossing. It creates a dangerous situation. So, the building, basically, also from the standpoint of commercial uses, the building is isolated. There's not traffic. I mean, yes, Route 378 is to the south of it, but how do you get there? You need to give a whole set of directions in order to say how to get there. Getting off at 8th Avenue, you got to turn, make several turns, and until you get back into that space. There's no traffic there's no local traffic.
As to this testimony, I'm not sure it's within his scope of expertise.
Okay, well, we'll keep moving.
Yeah.
Okay. Gene, what about the next variance, which was to decrease the minimum required off-street parking spaces? 118 required, 67 proposed. Tell us what we're looking for. Tell us how that relates, if at all, to the units themselves.
So we have 67 parking spaces on site, which is 1 parking space on site for each apartment. So then there is also a dead end of 13th Avenue where 28 more parking spaces fit, which would be public parking spaces. So, there'd be additional parking spaces.
Gene, where does
for
the
visitors.
requirement for 118, where does that come from?
It comes from the zoning ordinance. It says 1.75 parking spaces per unit, and it doesn't distinguish between efficiency versus 1 or 2 bedroom.
So if it was a 2-bedroom, it would be the same parking account.
That's correct.
And again, we have one bedroom, is that correct?
One bedroom.
And the rest are all the efficiencies.
They're all efficiencies other
Which
than
is,
that.
in essence, a no bedroom, is that right?
Correct.
Pardon?
Is there a basis for, what does this witness know about?
He's an architect.
I'm an architect, so
Architect, but you made a comment, it's essentially not, it's a no, your exact words were it's a no apartment, no basis.
No, that was my word. I asked him, it's essentially a no bedroom.
there are no bedrooms in an efficiency apartment. It's all open.
Okay. Now we have a variance. We're seeking to decrease the distance between parking spaces and a multifamily dwelling. Can you identify, first of all, where that's happening on the plan?
That happens along the north side of Building B here. And some of the parking spaces that wrap the west side of Building B.
Okay. And why do we need a variance for that? Why don't we just put those spaces where they would conform?
Well, if we would eliminate those parking spaces, then we would not be able to provide one parking space per apartment.
Do they
And
exist?
It is an existing paved area.
That's
yes.
where I'm going here.
Mhm.
Do those parking spaces already exist as we sit here today?
It's a gravel lot right now.
Right.
Yes. So you could park there.
Number of parking spaces we already spoke about. Um,
Can I interrupt real quick? Can you just explain the deficiency that you're asking for relief for on those? So in other words, you're saying it's an existing paved area.
Mhm.
It doesn't meet the separation distance?
That would mean that you need to have 15 feet of space between the parking space and the building itself.
Okay, and these are just abutting the building?
They abut the building
Okay.
on the north side here and wrapping the west of what's marked as Building B.
Mr. Schock, I think the issue would be by converting it to the residential use.
It creates that requirement because you don't.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That invokes that 15-foot separation. And Gene, your testimony is that configuration already exists. Is that correct?
Yes, this is all gravel area on the north side of the building and a paved driveway that wraps around the south side of the building on the Route 378 side. So it's all gravel or paved. Yes. In fact, we are going to reduce the amount of impervious coverage by putting in the tree islands and the 15-foot wide passive recreation area directly to the north of Building A.
Okay. I have no further questions for this witness.
If you could just tell me, yeah, on the section we were just talking about, the parking spaces right up against the building, will they be facing windows or what's on that side of the building?
There are apartments that wrap around the entire building. The double loaded corridor runs down, north south in Building B. So the parking spaces on this end here are pulling up to the end of the building. There are some windows of apartments that look out towards the west and to the east. So maybe 2 apartments might be looking out in the direction of the parking lot there.
All right, what I'd like to do is we will typically, when we have opposing counsel, we're going to defer to counsel first for questions. So Attorney Raschuti.
I just had a couple of questions, backing up just a little bit. Your testimony was there was a use variance in 2010.
There was a use variance granted in 2010.
And that was abandoned.
That calls for a legal conclusion.
It was not pursued.
The owner did not construct those apartments. Correct.
No other use proposed for that building until self-storage 2 years ago.
No other uses in the building until that point in time. Abatia, the owner of the building, can also testify to any uses in the meantime. Mhm. Yeah. Okay.
Are you aware of the 2012 settlement?
It was another zoning variance for a treatment center. Abatia pursued that with his own staff. We were not involved in that project.
That was after the 2010 variance, correct?
Yes.
So there was another proposed use project.
Yes.
That was not your testimony. With regard to the easement, my clients are the other party to that easement agreement.
Okay.
They have not been approached about widening the easement 25 feet. In fact, I think this plan may reach that easement agreement by permitting parking on.
We don't park on the easement at all. And we're not proposing to widen the legal document of the easement from 18 feet. We have just provided some more, a paved aisle, which is a little wider than 18 feet. only because the Bethlehem zoning ordinance requires that for two-way driveway, we need to have 25 feet wide. So we have actually given you some extra space to get through.
Part of that easement's on my client's property.
The only part that is germane to our discussions today is the part of the easement that's on our property.
Proposal is on widening 25 feet.
It widens at 25 feet on our property. We don't widen it across the Rust property on the north.
So you still won't have 25 feet of two-way traffic going across the property.
We will have 25 feet of two-way traffic going across the property. It fits on our property.
Okay, Attorney Fisher?
Let me start off with,
You need them to speak in the mic. Ask them to pick up that mic.
Oh.
Okay.
I don't want to,
But you have
Sure,
to.
Stan.
You have to speak it.
Can you use a mic?
Take that guy with you, please, yeah.
let me start off with the parking issue. As I understand, under the ordinance that you're familiar with, there is a requirement of 118 parking spaces. Is that correct?
It's based on 1.75 parking spaces per apartment. Correct.
And those 118 parking spaces are to be on site. Is that correct?
That's what the zoning ordinance says.
So of the 118 parking spaces that are required to be on site, you're proposing 67 of them to be on site.
That's
Is that
correct.
correct?
Correct.
Now, some of those proposed 67 also require a variance because they are within 15 feet of the building space. Is that correct?
That's correct.
How many of those additional spaces that you identified, I believe, on two sides of the plan are within the 15 feet?
Count them. So there are 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 parking spaces that just right here that are on the north side and on the west side of building B.
So of the so if I'm doing my math correctly, of the 67 required, only 56 of them so far are in conformity with the ordinance requirements before the variances are being sought. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, in addition, there's another variance for parking being sought by the applicant. Is that with respect to parking? Is that correct?
That pertains to trees dividing the parking lot.
Are you asking me or are you familiar with it?
There's one other variance that pertains to trees dividing the parking lot into 40 into groups of 40.
In other words, you're allowed a maximum, I believe it's of the maximum number of parking spaces in any one lot is 40. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how many are you proposing? How many is your client proposing to be within a single lot?
46.
So that's an additional 6 parking spaces that are not in compliance with the zoning ordinance before the relief is being sought here. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So if I've done my math correctly, of the 118 required parking spaces, all of which are to be on the premises, 50 are in compliance right now.
I think you're drawing conclusions that have gone too far here. You know, maybe 11 of them are within 15 feet of the building.
But you need a variance for that.
We do.
Okay. And 6 others, you need a variance because you're exceeding the maximum number in a single lot. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm back to my question. Right now, before you're seeking zoning relief that requires 118 parking spots on the lot, 50
No, you're
are actually in.
here's the reason why your logic is faulty. Because if you were to subtract those 11 parking spaces, then the lot that had 46 spaces in it would now be below 40, and you shouldn't take it below 56. There's no reason to.
But why do you need a variance for that then?
What I'm saying is that you're trying to claim that only 50 of our parking spaces are legal.
I'm only asking questions. I'm not
Okay.
claiming any.
Well, you said 50, and that's wrong. The 56 are in 100% compliance.
Help me to understand, and then I'll move on so I don't belabor.
Okay, so here's the group of parking that has 46 parking spaces in one area. 11 of those parking spaces are within 15 feet of the building. Take away those 11 parking spaces, 67 minus 11 is 56. Now that 46 minus 11 is 35. 35 parking spaces in one parking area. You don't need that particular variance anymore. So, you could take away 11 parking spaces from this parking plan and have 56 fully compliant parking spaces on the site.
Either way, you roughly need a variance of about 50% of the total required parking spaces on the lot. Correct? I'm not a mathematical genius, but it's roughly 50%, correct?
It's 67 118ths. Yeah, whatever that comes out to. Do the math.
All right, let's move on elsewhere. So the board is clear, and I think you testified earlier, the sole means of ingress and egress to this to this property is through the 14th Street overpass. Is that
14th
correct?
Avenue overpass. That is correct. Mhm.
Stand corrected. Now, once you cross the 14th Avenue overpass and head towards your client's property, would you agree with me that all of the buildings are either used for commercial or industrial purposes?
Yes.
In other words, there's no residences once you cross the 14th Avenue overpass
In this island,
in that island area.
there's no residences. We have residences entirely to the north and to the west of Route 378, all along the south side, along Union Boulevard, and you can see that our site is really right across from residential.
I understand, but what's it blocked by?
The highway.
Exactly. And once you cross the 14th Avenue overpass and head towards your client's property, you can't drive to any other residence. Is that correct?
Once you're across the overpass, you cannot drive to any other residence. No.
In other words, I'm correct. You can't drive straight across all the way up to the residences that you referred to as being up north. Is that correct?
You cannot drive there, no. There's a railroad grade here, which is slated to become a rail trail. It's part of Bethlehem's comprehensive plan to become a rail trail.
And as someone who is familiar with the Bethlehem city zoning ordinance, you'll agree with me that any type of residence is not a permitted use within the light industrial zoning district. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Including things such as bed and breakfasts. They're even to the extent they're used as, an overnight accommodation. They are not a permitted use in the light industrial area.
They are not a permitted use.
I'm sorry.
Yes, the residential is not a permitted use in the LI zone. That's why we're here tonight. That's correct.
Now, with respect to the use question, your client is investing a sizable amount of money towards this project. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I'm not going to put you on the spot in asking that because I really don't care. But would you agree with me that it appears as though that your client has not invested any money within the interior of the property since they acquired it?
I would disagree because he installed the storage units on the first floor in Building A throughout all of Building A, and he's invested a significant sum of money into doing that, into trying to get the building to work for one of the permitted uses, but the storage units have failed. And Abatia, who's one of our future witnesses, will speak about that.
you'll agree with me that among the uses that are permitted as of right there is a warehouse or a storage unit as a principal use. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's what he has been attempting to use the building for, but it's not working.
Other than I'll call them the storage units on the first floor, were any other areas of the building have any other areas of the building been used for storage?
We designed storage layout for the entire building, and Abe
My
started.
question is, has
so-
it been used? You're not
So
answering. Answer my
he started by doing phase one of the project to renovate the first floor into the storage units, which is the most accessible floor, the easiest to get to from 13th Avenue when you approach the building. And he figured he needed to get some of those rented. And then once he has some income and he proves that the market exists, then he intended to develop the rest of the building for storage units. And, so we have a plan that shows the entire building being developed as storage units. But the storage units are not renting. People don't know where it's located. They, for whatever reason, they don't want to carry their items in there. There's a lot more convenient storage that exists, where you can pull your car right up to your storage unit and unload directly into your unit. You don't have to
You know what, Mr.
wheel
Burke,
things in
I-
carts.
the-
Yeah.
The question though was, is anywhere other than the first floor, I think, converted to these?
It is
storage
not.
units?
It is
Okay.
not. Nowhere else
All
is
right.
converted. The project failed before it got any farther than to develop the rest of the building.
But I believe you testified earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, that some of those storage units, even in that limited area on the first floor, are actually rented out.
Abe Attia will testify as to the number that are rented.
But are you aware that you yourself testified that some of them are rented out?
A few are rented, from my understanding, and Abe will testify as to how many are rented.
So it's not that the building can't be used for storage purposes or warehouse purposes. It's just not been profitable for your client. Is that correct?
I'm going to let Abe Attia testify as to the profitability or whether it is a feasible use as a storage. If you can only rent 2 or 3 of the units, it doesn't make sense to have 100 units or to use the rest of the building. You haven't used the building. It is not feasible to use the building for storage units.
I appreciate you wanting to defer to Mr. Attia, but you did testify on direct examination as to how the building was being rented out. So now I'm going to
No,
ask you again.
excuse me, he just testified that several of the units were rented. That's what he testified to.
But he also testified earlier, and I think the record will
Right.
speak for itself.
Yeah, let's move on this.
Go ahead, finish your statement.
I believe he testified earlier, and the record will speak for itself. And I apologize if I've misstated his testimony, that the property had been rented out, but Mr. Attia didn't find it feasible. So my question is, back to Mr. Berg, do you agree with me that the property can be used as a warehouse or a storage unit, but it just has not been as profitable? as
I
Mr.
do not agree that the building
Talking
can
over
be
me,
used.
sir.
Hold on.
Okay.
Let him finish the question.
But it just has not been as profitable as Mr. Attia's company would like.
It's not even a matter of profit. It is not feasible.
Why is it not feasible?
If you construct a few hundred units and 5 of them rent, does that mean that that is a feasible use?
Can it be used? My question. Can it be used as a warehouse or a storage unit as it is currently being used? Yes or no?
No.
And why not? Since it's currently being used as a warehouse or storage unit.
Because the units do not rent. It is isolated. People don't know where it's located. They don't know how to get there, driving all of the circuitous route, getting off the highway and making 5 turns to get back into this location. They don't desire to wheel or cart their objects from their car or their truck back into this building. It is not desirable for that use. And it's not desirable for warehousing use, considering that you have 6'6" clear to the underside of sprinkler pipes. 7 feet, 11 inches clear, to the underside of girders. We have low ceiling heights. Warehouses don't work in low ceiling heights. Why would you want to drive a forklift around to load items, when you can't pile them high? It's not efficient. And then to have the tractor trailer traffic have to drive through a residential neighborhood past Nitchman Middle School, that doesn't make any sense.
Am I corrected in some of the photographs, and I apologize which ones, they were the A1 series. There appeared to be items that were stored on the, I'll guess it's the basement floor. Did I see that correctly?
There might have been some junk in the building. I don't know what those items are.
And one final question before I turn it over to council. You said that the floors are wood. Did I hear you correctly?
There are wood floors on the first floor and the second floor. The ground level is a concrete slab on grade.
And is that where the storage units are?
Storage units are on the first floor. They are on the wood floor, yes.
Or on the wood floor?
Mm-hmm. Because it's the most accessible floor. It is the floor where when you drive in 13th Avenue and you come right up to the front of the building, and there's the front door and the loading dock. That loading dock loads into the wood floor, the first floor.
Thank you, sir.
Attorney Di Pasquale.
Thank you. More questions for you, Chief Berg.
Yes.
The storage units. I'm looking at A4 in particular. And I think, if I understand it correctly, the gist of your argument is that this has not been a profitable business for your client. Is that right?
He's not been able to lease many of the units at all.
Okay. Are you familiar with other self-storage companies, like, for example, CubeSmart?
Yes.
Yes. Have you ever been to a CubeSmart?
I
Or
have
seen
not
pictures,
personally gone to
maybe?
CubeSmart, but I mean, I am familiar with storage facilities. Sure.
Okay. So I'm looking at this picture, and I actually just signed up for CubeSmart, but so I'm a little familiar with how it works. But I just looked at this picture, and I'm noticing a lot of problems that I think are getting in the way here. And before I get into that, I want to ask, when were these storage units built? Do you have any idea?
About 2 years ago, is that correct, Abe? Yeah, 2 years ago.
So it was after the expiration of the 2010 approval.
Craig, can you tell us when the 2010 approval expired?
I mean, if you don't know, you don't
Yeah,
know.
just
Okay,
say you
that's
don't
fine.
know.
You don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't know.
Does it seem possible to, if you think that you want to revent an approval, to create a use that purposely fails so that you then have a hardship?
I don't know why you would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that.
Is that how much it costs to build the first floor of storage units?
Abe Attia will testify as to that.
Okay. Well, I can tell you that it looks to me, and tell me if this is right, that there's water damage on the first floor all along these units and in between cracks. I don't know if it's concrete or wood. It looks like concrete, but it looks like there's water damage and sitting water on the floor of these storage units. Is that correct?
I don't see any water damage.
Permission to
Sure.
at least stand up and display. Maybe water damage isn't right, but at least he's sitting water along the cracks in the concrete here.
No, it's a wood floor that is a little dusty, and there might have been, I don't know if there's oil on the floor from when it was used as, or other that's seeped up at joints.
You also see the water bottle laying on the ground and the door also standing there. The big door right here.
Yeah, that was construction that was not yet completed.
Does this look like a safe or good place to do internal storage for your goods?
I don't think I would like the idea of driving back into this
Okay, just, you know what? Hold on.
Mhm.
Answer the question that's asked, please.
if the If the storage units were completed and locked, yes.
They haven't been.
But some of them have not been completed. I testified to that earlier.
Another picture. We're looking at A 4, 5, and 6, or actually A3. A1 pictures 3, 4, and 5. I know you're an architect, you're not a traffic engineer, but I think anyone who's a layman can look at this and identify it's a residential neighborhood and see the kids that are walking around. And I think when you identified that, imagine tractor trailers turning here, how bad that would be. And I think people can understand that. But what's your vision for how this would work if you extend this residential area of kids walking into an industrial area? Do you foresee kids walking like this along tractor trailers in an industrial area?
Well, I don't see families moving into efficiency apartments. So no, I don't see the kids walking through that area.
Will there
No.
be a restriction against families?
There's not a restriction against families.
And that's actually good because I do want to go into the apartments. These are efficiency apartments, and you tried to, correct me if I'm wrong, it looked like you tried to make the argument that only one person would be living in each unit.
It's a possibility.
It's a possibility. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that was an argument in favor of your variance, which is you don't need so many spaces because it's only going to be one person per unit. Is that correct?
That is an argument that many of these units will likely have one person living in an efficiency apartment. Correct.
But certainly more people could live there. A mother could live there with their child. 2 people could live there. Maybe a husband, wife, and a kid could live there, right?
I doubt that a husband, wife, and a kid would want to rent an efficiency apartment.
Right. They might not want to, but they might, right?
I think that that at most you're probably going to have 2 people per apartment.
And you mentioned that it would be a dangerous sight to see tractor trailers turning with people walking around, and that these tractor trailers have to drive through a residential area to get to an island of an industrial park. Do you think it is safe then to put a large residential project in the center of that industrial island, given that it is dangerous for the trucks to be driving by kids in the residential area?
I think that the clientele who is going to lease these apartments as efficiency apartments is likely going to drive their cars in there, and I doubt that you're going to have people walking in and out of 14th Avenue.
Right, but that's what people do, right? When they live somewhere, they walk around. Do they not?
They might walk around. They might get in their cars. Today, a lot of people jump in their car and they go to the park. They don't walk around their neighborhood necessarily. If they have a neighborhood to walk around, they will walk around that neighborhood. If they don't, then they'll get in their cars and go someplace to a park and enjoy a park.
All right, so I'd like to change gears now and go to permitted uses. And you mentioned some of the permitted uses, but I'm curious as to why, when you mentioned the permitted uses, you only brought up the sort of absurd uses given the location, such as a theater, a conference center, and a bus depot. But you didn't mention the following permitted uses in the district, which include offices, finishing, grading, stamping, heat treating, glass manufacturing, leather manufacturing, welding, sales of rental or of industrial equipment, a plant nursery, a recording studio, a shooting range, or paintball. These would all potentially be viable uses if you explore them a little bit, right?
You want to go down all the list? One by one?
Okay.
Animal cemetery. There's no open area for an animal cemetery. Animal shelter. The building is too large for that.
Well, I would like to note that I think it is important to keep this in perspective of cost, right? Relative to the cost that you're spending to create a non-conforming use versus the cost to create a use that conforms.
I think as a matter of law, it's impossible to create a non-conforming use. How would he do that?
Hold on, stop. You asked a question and you wanted him to go through the list, but we'll let him finish the list.
Okay.
Okay?
Auto body shop or auto repair garage. We have wood floors. They're not strong enough. The grades around the building do not match the floor lines. You cannot pull the cars inside. We don't have adequate overhead clearance. You could not put lifts inside this building. Bus maintenance or storage yard. You couldn't fit a bus inside this building. It's much too low in headroom. None of the grades match the floor lines. You can't pull a bus in on a wood floor. Bus, taxi, or passenger rail terminal. It's a bad location. It's an isolated location. It's not along a thoroughfare where you would want to have buses, taxis, and there's no active railroad nearby. Catering, custom offsite consumption. The size of this building is too big for fitting those uses in.
I object to that.
Communication.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, he can answer it.
What's the objection?
Yeah, I mean, he may not like his answer, but he's allowed to give his
Okay.
answer, and you can argue that it's a bad answer, but it
All right,
is
understood, understood.
objectionable,
Apologies.
right?
Communication tower that does not use the existing building. Conference center or exposition center has a low ceiling. It's not an expo center. We don't have adequate parking. Construction company or tradesperson's headquarters is not including but not limited to landscaping, building trades, janitorial contractor. These people want to have overhead doors so that they can pull up their pickup truck right to their garage. They don't want to have to pull up to the one and only loading dock for the building and wheel their things inside and outside. It doesn't work. Crafts or artisan studio. The location of this property is remote. You know, who's going to be able to find it where it's located at? It's bad for people who are coming to purchase the crafts or the artisans, you know, or the artwork that is created by these artisans. It's remote. Custom printing, copying, faxing, mailing, courier services. It needs better access, more open area. Dog daycare. The building is too large for the dog daycare. Dog runs are not alongside Route 378. That's not a good idea. It's not healthy for the pets. I don't think that people would want to put their dogs next to the noise of the highway. Exercise club. It's remote. It's unseen. It's hard to find. That's bad for business. Flea market, auction house. Same argument. It's remote. It's unseen. It's hard to find. Bad for business. Funeral home with the crematorium. It's too big. It's not a dignified place. This is not a funeral home. I don't think anyone would want to pay their respects to their loved one in this building at this location. A heliport. We don't have open land. It's too close to the highway and the adjacent uses. Kennel. The kennel use is small. Dog runs near Route 378 traffic. Not good. Laundry, commercial or industrial. We have that might occupy the top floor. You need ducting and venting for all the laundry equipment, and but then how do you occupy the remainder of the building? We have limited height for the equipment to fit in, and changing out equipment is difficult considering our ceiling heights and the clearances. Lumberyard, there's limited outdoor storage and low ceilings. It doesn't make sense for forklifts. When have you gone in a lumberyard, Home Depot, where you have an 8-foot ceiling? You don't. They have high piled storage so they can easily bring down additional stock. Office, it's in a poor location and configuration. It's unseen, remote. Plant nursery, no open ground. It does not use the building either. Recording studio, music. It's close to the noisy highway. It's hard to exclude all outdoor sound. Recreation, commercial, outdoor, including mini golf, golf driving range, archery, horseback riding, paintball, similar uses. There's no site space to fit all these types of uses and fit parking. Self-storage development, we already spoke about that, and Abe is going to testify further about the failed attempt to operate a self-storage development on the site. Target range, firearms, completely indoor and enclosed. you would need to have a backstop with thick sand in order to stop the bullets. And so if there would be any location where you might be able to do it, it would be in the basement, but the public can't find this location. You know, it's remote and for any sort of commercial use, it's just difficult to find. People don't know where it's at. They don't know how to get there. It takes a long set of instructions to tell people how to find the place. That's not good for any commercial business. Television or radio broadcasting studios. It's close to the highway noise. The height of the space is too low. It is not adapted well for that purpose. Trade or hobby school. We have a problem with parking for a trade or hobby school. There'd be a lot of students. They would all drive. Ingress and egress. It's an old obsolete building. And with those low ceiling heights, it's going to be difficult to use it for that purpose. Visitor center providing education and promotional information. It's a bad location. The people cannot find it.
You know what, Mr. Burke?
Yes,
I think we got 5 pages to go.
I'll go.
Yeah. Well,
Could just identify a use that you would like.
I was going to say, can we do one of
Yeah.
either pick ones, or can you at least group some together that are
All right.
that are virtually identical when you explain your answer?
Or Attorney Di Pasquale.
Yeah, I
is
can
in
wait.
it.
the
Yeah.
question. I think the point's been made.
Yeah,
I
think
get
the
it.
point's been made.
Yeah.
It was just getting tedious.
I
Sorry.
understand. I thought so.
No further questions.
My hand hurt from all that writing. so.
Yeah, we had writer's cramp over here. In which case I would open for questions from the board members.
Mr. Berg, you've testified several times that the ceiling heights are 6'6" and 7'6", correct?
There are locations where the clearance underneath sprinkler pipes is 7.6.
Are you actually proposing to have a 7'6" ceiling in an apartment?
We can do that with a soffit, and then we can raise the ceiling in other areas. You know, so there are areas in between girders where we can step the ceiling height a little higher. But we will have some soffits which are at that height, and that is a common thing to do in a residential building.
How about 6'6"?
6'6" is down in the basement level. The reason why that clearance came to light is because there is a ramp that comes from the existing grade, a concrete ramp that ramps down into that lower level. When you're at the top of the ramp, which is about 16 inches higher than the floor elevation, then the clearance to the pipe is that 6'6". We'll jackhammer out that ramp, and that'll solve that problem.
And those apartments are, can you show me on one of your, 1, 2, or 3, which apartments those would be?
They would be on lower level floor plan unit G7.
Can you point it out to these attorneys as well, Vince?
So that's the only place in the entire building that has a 6'6" clearance problem?
6'6" that's only a one spot.
That's the one spot.
Yeah, but I measured 7.6 and 7.7 at 20 other locations. Very common.
What's the average clearance throughout the entire basement?
So the
Guesstimate.
clearance problems occur at the sprinkler pipes.
Okay.
At all the sprinkler mains, which are necessary for this size of building. In any of these that are going into here. So those locations where we have low clearance situations, we can introduce soffits in one area of the apartment and step the ceiling higher in other areas. That doesn't work for warehouses though, where you're driving tractor trailers around and driving forklifts around and then a load bashes into a sprinkler pipe and busts the pipe and water's all over.
If you had to guesstimate, how many apartments are actually affected by either the 6'6" or the 7'6"?
I'd say the 7'6" clearances, I would say that all of these apartments on the lower level are going to have a soffit through them because that sprinkler main runs this length of the building through here. On the upper floors, you know, that there are varying locations where the sprinkler pipes are located, but you can drop a soffit in one area and then you can step the ceiling height in another area to make it taller ceiling height in other areas. So The 7.6 is perfectly legal for the residential.
Okay. Since you did all the photographs of the interior of the building, did you notice any mold problems as you were taking the photographs?
I was not looking for mold, but I'm not going to say that it didn't exist in the building. I think that once the building is cleaned out and it has a new use and it gets a new roof on it, and then I think that that all of any of those issues, if they exist, would be remediated.
I think that's all my questions for right now. Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the board?
Yeah, and maybe you don't know about this, but in the April 27th, 2010, from the zoning board, it mentions Exhibit 1A such that at least 88 parking spaces will be available. Was there a previous plan that showed 88 spaces that you're aware of?
I think that some of those 88 parking spaces were counted at the end of 14th, at the end of 13th Street, which 13th Avenue, where there are 28 additional parking spaces that are on a public street, on a dead-end public street. That shows on the site plan.
So the 67 number then has an additional 28 on public streets.
28 on public street here.
And they're already marked parking spaces?
Some of them are striped. I don't know that all of them are.
But the city's responsible for those?
They're in the street. They're in the 13th Avenue right of way.
Those are in addition to what you were talking about earlier.
They're in addition to the 67.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Eugene, can you point out what you're talking about? It's hard for me to see.
So there's Ferry Street.
Yeah.
And then right on 13th Avenue there.
And these purple spaces do not exist now, right?
Some of these parking spaces up against the building.
Gene, can you hear what's being said? That,
You're going to have to speak up.
yeah, we have a problem when you have these individual discussions. Thank you.
Some of these parking spaces are striped on the 830 13th Avenue side of 13th Avenue.
Any other questions from members? Go ahead, Jim.
Since you went down that road, are there any other tenants or buildings or businesses that use those spots currently that you can guarantee that they would be dedicated towards your project?
I normally don't see people parking there. If you look at any of the photographs that we've taken on the west side of the building, are there any cars parked there? There might be one. And I think that it's a disabled pickup truck that has flat tires that I don't know if somebody came to put their items in the building and they got flat tires and then left the vehicle there or what. But that was all that I saw when I visited the site.
Going back to the storage units, do you have 24/7 access to your unit currently in the building?
Abatia will testify as to the operation of the storage units.
Anything else from the board?
Yeah, when you come across 14th Avenue onto the site, this photograph, which is the aerial view of the whole site, where 14th Street intersects with Gary Street, where you would make a right to go back to this property, there's two buildings pictured on either side of 14th Street on Gary. Do you know what those occupancies are?
The right-hand side, so you're saying this building right here, which is to
Yes, yep.
that's to the south and the east, south of Gary Street, east of 14th Avenue is Century Kitchens. They
That would be my client.
yeah. Mhm.
And they manufacture
ones who
kitchens
have a-
there, or
what's
are
that?
are kitchens manufactured there, or are they displayed? Is it a displayer?
Pardon me?
I'm
If
just
you can't
wondering.
answer, just
Yeah.
let us know.
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with these other uses. The owners here, they can testify as to that.
Okay. And on the left side of 14th Avenue, the smaller building?
Uh, Christmas City Printing.
Okay.
Mr. Berg, are you able to offer an opinion with regard to emergency vehicle response to this site?
On the site plan, there's a fire truck turning detail here, which shows the fire trucks and their access to get in and around the entire building. So it is accessible to fire trucks, and the building is fully sprinklered per NFPA 13. So that's a better sprinkler system than would be required in the residential use.
Any other questions from members of the board?
Just one. If there's 20, you have 67 parking spots plus let's just say plus the 28. That gives you the 95 to get you down to the 88 that was mentioned before. Do you think you'd be able to reconfigure the parking so that you wouldn't have the 0-foot proposed variance relief, at least in front of windows?
I really don't think that we can lay out the parking in another manner to squeeze more parking spaces on the site.
I guess I'm not asking you to squeeze more. I'm just asking if you eliminated 7, would you be able to reconfigure so that they would be away from windows?
No.
Okay.
All right. Just so everyone knows, it's my intention following the questioning of this witness, we'll take about a 10-minute break. Are we finished with questions from the board? Okay. Are there any questions from members of the audience?
Just have one comment if I may.
Yeah, go ahead. Mr. Pfeiffer.
Thank you. So my comment just goes back to 3 questions I heard from 3 separate board members. The city has not been approached regarding any improvements for that section of 13th Avenue or to use that for parking for this facility. So we just have not been approached.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Go ahead.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
Attorney Shack, anything from you?
No.
All right, Jane, then we're going to go off the record for about a 10-minute break. Well, I'd like to resume at 8:45, please.
Just since we have some folks here that might not have been here before, the live stream does not stop when means the microphones remain live. So if you want to have conversations, just do it away from the microphones, please.
Is it working now?
It is working, correct.
Oh.
I'm gonna let you go first.
Want me to get out?
No.
I can get out.
By the flag here. I don't go out here flag draped like I'm ready for a funeral.
And that's what I said. It's a good thing this isn't.
Where's all your snacks? Snack.
I'm glad it didn't happen. I am so anti-winter. It's unbelievable. I like to fast forward to start playing golf again.
They said 6 to 8 inches.
Chuck Malinchik in the morning.
Should name, I didn't hear the spellings.
Do we have a card or
All the
something?
south.
Again, I just, to me, whatever falls in my driveway, I'm more than happy to contribute to a ski resort somewhere. But I'd like them to
Big P.
come and get it and take it home with you.
U. L. Not an easy one.
familiar name, no, I don't know why I didn't get it.
It's all good, no worries. Herb Yard. I gotta make sure you get the name right. 860 14th Avenue, irrevocable trust. 860 14th Avenue. It is a business. It is. Industrial property.
It's a working business?
Yeah, yeah.
The name of the. Property manager?
Yeah. I'll give you more space. I didn't mean to pinch you.
And is there a source summary of the opposition to this?
There's a summary of the application. Putting a resident. Of the potential residents, but also just the general safety. Streets that people.
There's still businesses or any other.
Yeah, it's an industrial park. Here, I'll show you.
All right, so sticking residents.
Yeah, I don't know if we got to see it.
Around here, I just
Yeah,
don't
so this is
remember
the property that we're talking about here.
Yeah. I see.
Yeah, yeah, so all of this is.
Can you fit?
Yeah, I can fit. Yeah, so
The lag is.
so you get rid of industrial parks, typical.
You're good.
Sorry.
No, I didn't sit down so you could get.
We both. Here we go. Two ships passing in the night. Colliding head
You can
on.
let them speak.
All right, Jeannie, about ready? Okay, Attorney Preston.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to call Abraham Attia as my next witness. Abe got here a little late. I think he might need to be sworn.
Raise your right hand, please. Just swear by mighty God, the searcher of all hearts, that the testimony that you shall give in this proceeding should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And as you shall answer to God at the last great day. Do you so swear?
I do. Abe, state your name, spell your name, please.
Abraham Richard Atiyah, Atiyeah.
What's your connection to this
I'm
application?
the owner of the property.
I want to talk about a few of the things that Gene was talking about earlier and came up on cross-examination. Let's start with the idea of the self-storage or the storage units. You have, at one time, I believe, according to the signage, installed storage units here?
I did. I designed and I paid an architect, engineer, structural, mechanical, electrical engineer to design 800 units that basically operate the whole facility. I applied for permits in the city of Bethlehem and I was granted permits. The code inspector forced us to bring the whole building up to code, sprinkler system, everything up to code in order to operate the section of the building, 145 units. We figured we would do it in phases, so limit our risk of construction. So we built 145 units of the 800. However, code enforcement said, you got to bring the whole building up to code. So we had everything, emergency lighting, sprinkler, new fires. I spent around $500,000 to make it code ready to open up this self-storage facility.
And how many units were you able to rent?
We rented out 3 people to the public. We put the sign on 370 and there were 3 people that gave us, that were tenants in the building of 145 units.
So it's 140, would you just do one of the floors? Is that what you
The
did?
first floor, the easier floor, main entrance, ADA compliant, 88 bathrooms we built. We made it up to code, expecting the 145 to fill, and then we would go on to build more units.
And you got 3 units rented?
Correct.
And what's the state of that operation today?
We closed it down. We relocated the 3 tenants. We moved them out, and we closed the self-storage facility down.
Why?
Because it just doesn't work. It's failed. You can't pay a property manager, open and close, and you can't pay the overhead, the insurance, utilities to manage 3 tenants. It's just the project failed.
But if I said to you, you had one, let's say 1 storage unit in there. Let's say you had 1 storage. Doesn't that prove that you can use that building for storage?
It does.
Okay. Now, let's talk about what you want to do with the building itself. What are these units called again?
They're going to be called graduate student housing. This is a special product. Okay. It's going to be called this. We're going to call it the synthetic thread studios. It's the same approval we got it may have been 8 years ago. We were here in front of the board and I offered the same testimony that we were going to offer kids when they graduated from college and they didn't want to go home and live with their parents. And they were going to look for a job and they would rent out an affordable studio apartment, it's 400 or 500 square feet, almost like a college dorm with a kitchen, 1 room. And we were going to market this to Lafayette, Lehigh, Muhlenberg, Moravian, Cedar Crest College, all the local schools, Penn State, kids that graduate, that this is going to be a cool little location for graduate students to be able to live and function and then go out and get a real job. And once they get a job, they will move out. They'll move next door to Woodmont or a nice 1-bedroom location once they're out. It's just more like a transitional student housing.
And the units will be leased, is that correct?
Yes.
They're not going to be condoed or sold? is
No,
that
no,
right?
we're going to lease the units out.
Okay, and you're going to control the leasing?
Of course, yes.
And was it your intention to lease restrict these to single occupancy?
Single occupancy, no pets, no kids, graduate students only. You can't, if you're a high school kid or, you have to have just recently graduated from a college to rent from us. We're going to market this towards recently graduated college students. It's a little niche and we think it's pretty neat in Lehigh Valley and there's demand for it, especially in the city of Bethlehem. It's a great city.
Well, what if the board just say we're to grant the request of relief, but condition it on the fact that you lease restrict these to single occupancy? Is that a problem for you?
That's fine. I accept that.
Let's talk about parking. How would you handle parking on site?
Each unit's going to have a reserved parking spot. So 67 spots have 67 parking spots, have 67 units. If somebody's in one of their parking spots, they call the property manager. Property manager will have that car towed out. And we want that student to have his own parking spot. They park and then it's reserved for that particular unit. And then the overflow parking that's on that street, the public parking.
28 units?
The
20
28
spots?
units. I did talk to Mike Elcall, the director of public works. He actually walked the site with me years ago. And they said the city would have to go through council and get it all approved. But if I finish paving it and cleaning it up and lighting it and maybe putting some meters in there, the city would be fine with it being used as public parking. But they wanted me to pay for the expense of the paving and all that. And they said they wouldn't do it. And then we also talked about up Gary Street. Up Gary Street is where our neighbors have their warehouse, and that's also a public street. Right now, you could do public parking on one side of that street. The other side is where they bring their tractor trailers, and I think Gene showed that. That is also public parking in there. So you technically could park cars at both sides of Gary Street too. I know that there's no parking zones there because of the tractor trailers blocking that road, but that's also future parking if necessary. And then also PennDOT has, I would pursue PennDOT along the side of our building. There's a grass area in there that PennDOT owns, And if I might be able to develop a lease with PennDOT to be able to use some of that grass area for overflow parking and maybe pick up another 20 spots. We're going to pursue that in the future, but right now I don't own it. PennDOT does, and it's a grass area, so there might be some consideration of leasing some extra parking there for the overflow.
Okay. I have nothing further for this witness.
Okay. Do you want to? All right, Attorney Raschuti, questions?
Mr. Tia, how are you?
I'm fine, Attorney Rashoot. Long time. How you
Yeah,
been?
it's been a long time. All right, so talk about self-storage.
Mhm.
This climate controlled,
Yes, sir.
and why climate controlled, air conditioned, heated?
Well, it was balanced where you wouldn't freeze or you wouldn't heat. There was heat on, but there was no air conditioning in the summertime. But it was heated.
Testimony was you built 145 units,
Yes, sir.
rented 3 of them.
Yes.
What marketing did you do?
Well, we have billboards up, a digital billboard system, and we also have we did direct mailing with the morning call. We have a wall sign on the side, and we did 1 month free specials. I was shocked that we couldn't fill the place because, the self-storage business is a very good business. We were expecting. I spent a lot of money and time doing it, prepping it for that, and it failed. It's just.
Said what I was going to say. The self-storage is a good business, so curious how this failed. Did you have 24-hour access?
No, we had access. It closed, I think, at 8 o'clock in the evening. We opened the door up at 6, and we closed it around 8 o'clock.
So there was no key codes or anything?
No, our property manager opened the door and closed the door. That's how we managed it.
Where successful ones usually have the key codes and 24-hour access.
Yes, sir.
About putting that in there.
No.
Now you said you spent $500,000 to get your code ready, and that was just for the sprinkler system.
No, that was it was about 400,000 to build the units themselves. The building was a shell, clean it, light it, up the code, build all the store, build 145 units. We had to put a backup sprinkler system. The fire department made us put all this extra backflow preventers in the system, and then we had to change all the sprinkler heads throughout, emergency lighting. It was a chore.
Back up a little bit. 2010, you came before this board and you got an approval for similar use. Why didn't you pursue that?
What do you mean by similar use?
You got approval for residential apartment building, correct?
For the studios. Well, right when we got it approved, the market tanked. It was during the recession, and I love the idea. I mean, I'm glad the board approved it, and the board, and it was a great use at the time. Unemployment was very high. Okay, after that, there's demand now for the reason why we didn't build. There was no demand at that time. Recession hit, and the 1 year expired. When you get a permit here, you only have 1 year to build it. If not, it expired. So the time expired, and now the economy's better. People are working. Kids are graduating from college, and they are looking for jobs. They want this product is a specialty product. If we were building luxury apartments, we wouldn't build it here. This is studios. This is for college kids that graduate. It's an efficiency type living. They're in, they're out, they're going to work. They're driving through the park.
2012, you also approached about putting in a treatment center.
I did.
That issue.
No, treatment center was a court settlement with the city. I know you were involved. It was a nice settlement. My treatment professionals came in and said that it's not a suitable location for people that are under medical drug and rehab treatment and detox. It just wasn't a suitable location. It wasn't when you're in getting medical treatment for drug and alcohol. It just wasn't a good spot. So my customer at that time didn't want to operate a drug treatment center in this location, so we never built it.
Think it's a suitable location for apartment stuff?
For studios, it is. It's cool. it's a, you know, it's a 3-story brick warehouse, and I converted the silk mill next to Moravian College. It was the same thing, 3-story brick. It's cool. You got a 3-story brick building in a mini business park. So it's going to be a cool complex. It's a neat looking, you graduate from Lehigh, bam, or wherever, and it's going to be a loft conversion. And there's a lot of them going on in the city of Bethlehem. Most silk mills in Lehigh Valley, okay, if you go from Reading, okay, to Allentown, to Easton, Bethlehem, most silk mills are converted into apartments. This is a silk mill. It's a former mill. It's a perfect conversion. So we're doing what's going on in Easton. It's like people convert 3-story silk mills into lofts or apartments. I'm doing what's been done and what I've done in the past.
Think people are going to rent studios in an industrial area?
It's a light industrial area. Okay. It's a mini business park. You know, there's pet grooming place. There is another self-storage facility in this park that brings in retail traffic, people, you know, going there. And next door is the former Lowe's, which was the Durkee Hill plant. Used to be the Durkee Hill plant that the board knows all about. They approved Lowe's and those nice apartments. So we are right next door to an apartment community, you know, if you go up the hill a little bit. So there are a lot of compatible residential uses, and I think it'll be very successful here because the rents are going to be affordable.
Talk about complaints. You have residents in there. My client owns a property there. They rent it out to a business that gets deliveries early in the morning. Restrictions or put warnings on your lease that this is an industrial area, that we don't hear complaints. Our clients don't want to be hearing that trucks blocking the road because they're getting a delivery.
Well,
I think it's going to impact their business. I think it's a hardship for our clients at that point.
We respect it. Who are your clients, if I could ask?
I represent
Heath Thrust. Oh, that's to the north, across the street. No, I got you. No, I wouldn't spend the money doing this. All the neighbors are respectful neighbors. I mean, if there were a trucking terminal and they were operating a late hours of the night, I wouldn't be here. I think, you know, the cabinet company next to me, and then the guy down on the other side that Attorney Fisher represents, they have a self-storage pods in there. People come down there, and there's nothing crazy that would make me not build this because it's a mixed-use park that's adjoining a residential neighborhood. If you look at the surrounding neighborhood, this little mini business park is a drop of island where you're surrounded by residential. So we're more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood than you guys are. So I think it's a good location for residential. I mean, ultimately, we have Bethel Manor down the street, a lot of churches. I know, and your clients are good clients. They're compatible with the neighborhood.
Well, you said you're more compatible.
We are.
We're there before a lot of the residential.
If you go out 3 miles,
Wait for a question.
Let me just
go ahead.
Let me just move on a little bit here. With regard to the parking. Previously, Mr. Burke testified that there would be 2 people in a unit. You said you're going to restrict it to 1.
We're intending to restrict it. Gene Berg designed the building. I'm the owner, builder, developer. So yes, we're intending to have 1 student per unit. Okay, 2 students can't rent from us. The lease is going to have 1 person on the lease and 1 car per unit. That's a restriction. Yes.
You're okay with that being in a zoning decision?
100%. If it's a restriction, it's a deed restriction. Yes, we'll accept that.
Would you also be okay with a restriction being put in the zoning approval, approved, that each tenant signs an acknowledgement that they're renting in an industrial area, acknowledge that there could be noises and loud noises and different obstacles that come with being in an industrial area.
Yeah, I have no problem with that at all, putting that in lease.
Now, you did testify regarding the additional parking. Now, where would visitors park?
I think visitors are going to park out front on 13th on the public parking spot is where they would park because all the other spots are reserved. So those spots will be, and then if I could work out something along with PennDOT and pick up 20, 30 spots on that side and also talk to a neighbor actually after 5 o'clock, everybody leaves the park. And after 5 o'clock, our tenants are going to be coming into the park. Okay, so it's a transition, and some ordinances and municipalities trade off parking when like there's apartments in business parks, so the park leaves, the residents come in, and they trade off parking for the same spots. Maybe some of the neighbors will lease us spots for that overflow parking. And I actually pursued my one neighbor today to see if he would sell me a parcel on the corner. And maybe some of the neighbors, if they have available parking after 5 o'clock, maybe I could rent that for our overflow, our visitors. That's I'm going to pursue that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Fisher.
Just a few questions.
Sure.
Mr. Dean. You were present when Mr. Berg testified towards the end of his questioning regarding some of the permitted uses that are in that zoning district and why he felt that they were not appropriate uses. Did you hear those questions and answers?
Yes, sir.
And would you agree with his opinion that many of them were just not proper uses because it was I think using his words, poor location or remote or difficult to get to? Would you agree with his assessment?
Well, I can't agree because it depends specifically on what they were. Like there were probably 10 different reasons on each particular use. So I don't want to I don't want to confirm it unless you're talking specifically about a particular use. You know, I mean, it's like
I'm going to follow the suggestion from council as well as one of the board members, I believe. Would you agree that some of the uses just were not appropriate because of the poor location, because it was remote?
Yes.
Now, just a couple more questions. You said you're the owner. Is it you individually, or are you the owner of, just helping you, are you the owner of Pennsylvania Venture Capital Inc.?
I am, yeah.
All right. And then finally, you testified to that this was the same approval you got 10 years ago. Did I understand your testimony correctly?
Well, I don't know if the dates were correct, but it's the same approval. Yes. Well, it's schematically, the interior of the building is the same. The parking has changed.
Yeah, because the city zoning ordinance changed.
Correct. And we tried to comply as much as possible. I told them originally, use the same approval. The board approved it with the parking layout. And then Attorney Preston, everyone said, no, you got to comply to current parking issue. So we redesigned it and tried to be as close as we can to match the ordinance. And we spent a lot of time doing it. I had an architect, civil engineer, and an attorney look at it, and we came as close to the current ordinance as possible. But at that time, they approved it with whatever we presented.
I believe it was exhibit number 3. I'll stand corrected, but would you agree with me that which was the zoning hearing board decision from around 2010?
Yeah.
Would you agree with me that back then you only needed 101 parking spaces? Does that sound familiar to you?
At that time, whatever the ordinance said was my recollection. Yeah.
And you proposed a fairly high number of parking spaces back in 2010. I don't recall the exact amount. Am I correct?
Yes, we did, but that was without. That was just a schematic. Without being civilly designed. They went out the city. Without the city planning department review that plan. After they reviewed it, which the planning commission came back and showed us all of our deficiencies, and we realized, wow, we presented a schematic plan, not an engineer design plan that wasn't approved by the planning commission. So when we did that, we came back and realized, and the board at the time said we had to go through the planning commission, but we never followed through and done that. The board would have probably shortened down our parking spots and realized some of our parking was not on what property we owned. Now, this is the 67 are exactly what we legally own and can attend to that. We legally own 67 spots. However, there's more around that publicly owned, but we can't use that in our application.
That's correct. So right now you only have 67 spots laid out on the property.
Correct. And then in the past, when there were 150 people working in the building, there were, used to be 150 sewing factory workers in this building, and they had the same parking then as they do now. So the non-conforming parking a long time ago, that this building was non-conforming as far as parking, but but I'm saying that there was a parking problem a long time ago, and so we're less, I think 67 spots for 67 studios. I think it's more reasonable. We're becoming more close to a reasonable amount than what was in the past.
Now, you were present before the City Planning Commission meeting earlier this year in July of 2019 to present a plan to them. Is
We
that
did.
correct? And would you, and at that meeting, and I have the minutes if you want to read it and review it, but one of the Planning Commission members, Mr. Malozzi, noted that there is not much compatibility with the surrounding area since it's very industrial. If you'll accept my representation, I can give it to council if need be. Would you agree with his assessment?
No, I wouldn't, because Mr. Malozzi, if you're in the industrial park looking out, it looks industrial. But if you're at the elementary school and the Rose Garden and in Bethlehem Manor and at the Greek Church and looking in, it looks more residential than it looks industrial. So it depends on how you're looking at it. Mr. Malozzi was in the industrial park looking outwards. Okay, it's so the smart man looks from the outward, looking inward, and see what your surroundings are: schools, beautiful apartments, Lowe's, shopping. So the apartments are more compatible with the region, but it's not. It's not a real compatible use in a mini business park. But ultimately they approved it.
It's a mini business park. You've used that term multiple times tonight. What do you mean by a mini business park?
Well, that's a trade secret. I can't tell you that.
Is that all right? Let's try it this way. Once you cross the 14th Avenue Bridge, would you agree with me that you've now entered the light industrial zoning district? Correct?
Well, hold on.
Correct? Yes or no?
Yes.
And all of the entities that operate there are light industrial businesses. Is that correct?
That's where the business park. That's where there are.
Yes or a no again?
Repeat the question again.
And once you enter into the light industrial zoning district, all of the entities that operate there operate a light industrial business. Is that correct? Yes or no?
Uses that are primarily permitted in the light industrial zone, but there are some business uses in there. Doggy daycare, there is. That's. I don't think that's an industrial use, but there's a doggy daycare there.
No residential uses.
No, but there are retail. A doggy daycare is a retail use. That's what I mean by mini business park. Those,
No residential uses.
correct.
Thank you, sir.
Attorney D. Pasquale.
Thank you. Mr. T, a few questions. Let's talk about the storage units. Just give me a second to grab the pictures. I want to look again at picture A4 that was submitted. I think we have a copy if you need me to give you one.
Yeah, bring it over, please.
Yeah. May I?
Sure.
Yeah. Is that representative of what most of the storage area space looks like?
No.
Can you please elaborate?
I'm not sure when this picture was taken, but this could have been under construction. This is, I think, was taken under construction. 95% of the units in there are built with doors on that are, because I had to get a CO inspection for this, so we're CO'd.
Okay. So Eugene said that I'm sorry, I'm forgetting his last name. Berg said that he took this picture. I can't remember exactly when, but my recollection is that it was somewhat recently. Is that not correct?
No, this looks like while it was under construction. It doesn't look like that now.
So you would agree that that's not an attractive, safe-looking storage space?
It looks nasty.
Okay.
It does. Yeah.
Would you agree that your effort to create the use that is non-conforming is far outweighing your effort to created. a
I'm going to
conforming
object to
use.
the form of the question. He can't create a non-conforming use.
Right.
The use that's,
Legally impossible to
the
do
use
that.
that is creating the variance. Sorry, I misspoke. Let me rephrase it so there's no
Yeah.
misunderstanding. Is it correct that your efforts to create the use that's the subject of this variance far outweigh your efforts to create the conforming use on the property?
You know, I've been in front of zoning boards for about 40 years, and that's probably one of the dumbest questions everybody ever asked me. That's like a,
Can you answer it?
it's
Okay.
like, no. I mean, my God.
Answer the question, please.
Just
Okay.
answer. it,
Repeat the question again.
We'll move on. We'll move on.
My God.
So you said that you thought this would be a cool little location. What did you mean by that?
It's a quaint silk mill. It's cool. It's a 3-story. It's a cool. I don't know if you ever seen any of the Easton or Bethlehem silk mills. It's a cool silk mill. It's a 3-story, neat looking silk mill. You know, perfect for an apartment conversion. That's what's going on the East Coast.
I meant the location, which is what you said, not the building. You said it's a cool little location.
It's a cool little building and a cool little location. It's got green space. It fronts out on 378. It looks out at B. Braun. It looks out at a beautiful, brand new elementary school. It looks out at the Martin Tower project. It's next to Lowe's. It's a cool neighborhood. It's in West Bethlehem. You know, it's a cool place for that's what I mean. It's a neat little. It's got a walking path that's in this park that's going to go to Center City. The old rail bed. There's going to be a walking path where you could walk in there. You could go to Center City right from this park. It's designed ultimately to be. It's a nice residential, just like the Woodmont apartments are. You know, that's what it's a quaint little, nice little area to live in.
Okay, I'd like to introduce 2 photographs. What would be the correct way to do that this time? To cross, just
Yeah.
bring them.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
These are
Um,
photographs of. I can.
really, just hold on a second, because we should mark those, right? So, let me just look at the client's name. So we'll call it,
Yeah, you're going to have to label them differently. for
yeah, because
three.
we'll have to label them differently if somebody else has other exhibits. No. So why don't we call it Trust 1?
Okay.
Yep, we'll start with that.
I have copies of these for the board.
Thank you.
Would you like them now?
Please.
Yeah.
Just give me a moment. I have additional copies after the question. This is what I'll be referring to.
Stream that flows by too, you know that.
And then we'll get them back there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you agree that Trust 1 is a picture of 13th Street facing, we're gonna say northwestish?
Yes,
Trust 2 is a picture of Gary Street.
yes.
You just testified that there's a nice walkable path. I don't see any walkable path or sidewalk there, do you?
Well, in Trust 1, there's a lot of nice green space. There's a grass, okay, and there's also a stream. There's a nice waterway here that nobody even knows about. There's a live, active stream that goes through along our property. So, you know, this green, it's nice. You know, if you look at the green, it's nice. Trust 2, okay, is something I talked about with Mike Elcall about Gary Street in particular needs curbing, sidewalk, landscape trees and stuff. And we talked about possibly me doing that if we're allowed public parking on Gary Street, where I would put some landscaping trees along that street so it doesn't look industrial. It does look industrial now, I agree, but
Just industrial zone.
it's what?
Industrial zone, yeah, it does.
It's a light industrial zone, but it looks industrial. It does. But when I met with the director And we talked about if we're going to put public parking along Gary Street, that he talked about lighting, he talked about street trees, possibly some sidewalk and curbs to get people up and out, up in the street. We talked about possibly doing that.
Do you see the loading dock on what's called Trust 2?
I do. I see the illegal loading dock. It's when sometimes that tractor trailer parks illegally on the public street, and I never made one complaint yet. You know, it's something that when they get their deliveries in and out, I drive by there on a regular basis, and he's illegally parked on the public street. I never called the police one time. Never made a complaint.
What do you think would happen if there were 100 residents or so, 67 residents, if you restricted to one per person? That
Well,
additionally
I-
needed to
Hold on,
traverse the
let him
street.
finish the question.
I don't think there's going to be a
Wait a
conflict.
second, I didn't hear the last part of your question.
What do you think would happen if there were additional 100, or you say 67 residents making multiple trips a day, passing this bottleneck street where we already know that is, used as a loading dock sometimes?
I got the solution for you. Most people go to work at 8 o'clock. Okay, they're leaving. Well, and when the tractor trailer's coming in, it's usually 2 or 3, and it's in the afternoon. So most generated trip generation for apartments is in the morning and at 5 when they come home. Okay, so I don't think they're going to conflict the people coming in there.
Trust 1 and Trust 2.
Going in the conflict with the tractor trailer parking there. I don't think there's going to be a conflict because I do it. I don't complain. I just drive around.
You just did complain, to be clear.
Well, I could call the police on next time I do it. I might do it. Okay, but the thing is, right now I'm okay with it. It's not there's so much room when they park their trailer and there's room to get around them. And I think the same thing, the people living there, if the trailer's there, they're going to just drive around them. If both sides are parked, then there's going to be a problem. I don't think there's going to be a conflict because residents come in after 5. Okay, and when the park's empty at 4:30, 5 o'clock. Most people leave at 3:30, 4 o'clock at the park. So I don't think there's gonna be that big conflict you all are worried about.
If you're, let's say the property has 3 tenants right now for the storage unit, which you testified to, and it has you driving back and forth. And if your frustration level with the truck traffic is already such that you're threatening to call the police, what do you think will happen when there's 67 to 100?
No.
Hold on.
Come on.
Let's move on.
Attorney DePasquale, since I'm not totally familiar with the site, can you point out where Trust 1 and Trust 2 actually are on the map?
Yeah, sure. And our engineer will testify to this in more detail. Background. This right here, this street right here is the view you have on Trust 2
Okay,
on Gary Street.
that's to the west of the building in question.
That's right. So you come up 14th Avenue, your only entrance in. If you're going to get to the subject property, you have to cross Gary Street. You have to make a right and go across Gary Street. And Trust 1 is a picture of the turning radius of 13th, looking at this building.
Okay, thank you.
There's no question, Nate. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Do you think there's any basis to be concerned about it being student graduate housing and let me say graduate student housing, and any parties or socializations that would bring increased parking or socialization or loud noise or venturing around the area that would create any unsafe circumstances?
I don't think so. When they're living in a 400, it's a 400 square foot studio. There's going to be no room for partying. They're small. When they're partying, they're going to go to the bars and the clubs and party. And there's going to be restrictions. If any tenants act up, we're going to evict them, move them out. We're not going to tolerate no bull. It's going to be managed professionally. We manage about 600 rental units in Lehigh Valley. We don't mess around. If a tenant messes up, kick them out. I can tolerate it. I don't want my neighbors to be mad at me and call me up. We're respectful. We've been in Lehigh Valley for 58 years, bro. We're not going to allow a tenant to ruin a neighborhood or to scare the other tenants away. I'm not going to do it. One bad tenant in the building, they act up, they're evicted. That's what we do. We don't tolerate nuisance apartments, nuisance bars, or any of that stuff. It's just not the type of business we're in.
No further questions.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
Just have a couple. You indicated, Mr. Attia, that the leases would be restricted to one person. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And are they going to be 1-year leases, or how are your leases structured?
1-year leases.
And I'm confused about whether it's just graduate students, or could they be between jobs? Could they be between schools, or do they have to be in graduate school?
We're trying to create, you have to graduate from college to be in the place, to make that niche. It's a place where I just graduated from Lehigh. I'm looking to get a job at Air Products. I'm going to live here for a couple months or maybe a year while I'm looking for a permanent job and a permanent location. We're going to niche this. It's only 67 to try and make it a cool place for a graduate college to say, hey, I'm living at the Threadmill studio. So we're trying to develop it to be a niche. And yes, we're going to restrict it to recent. You have to have graduated from college that year to be able to move in there. And there's thousands of kids that graduate from college in Lehigh Valley, and I think we could recruit 67 of them. We're going to talk to most of the college.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from members of the board?
Mr. Attia, the number 67, is it feasible to do the building with fewer apartments, or are you going by based on what was on your previous approval?
Well, it laid out good. It laid out good because each window well basically gives you a unit. So they're only 12-foot wide window wells each set, and column to column. So it gives you a real nice studio layout to fit 67. It's expensive to put a residential elevator in, bring it up to code. So we're trying to max out the square footage. There's actually space all along the back where there's no windows, where it's going to be for storage for the people that rent from us there. So can we operate it with less? It's possible, but it's going to be, I was expecting to do it with 67, but there's a possibility where, if we eliminated a few units on the lower level, we could probably make it function.
And I'm just trying to go for my own clarification with regards to the apartments themselves. At one point, you call them lofts. At one point, you call them studios. To me, a loft is an elevated sleeping area with a lower level.
True.
But yet, Mr. Berg testified that in some places you only have a 7.5 foot ceiling. Which is it?
It's a good question. Lofts was a word we used when we opened the Silk Mill in Raven. It's like a cool. It's a word. A loft. But there are some units in some sections of this building, Jim, that the floor there's 14-foot ceilings in the back section, the old section, the wood frame section, are in there. So you could use a higher ceiling, maybe build a little loft in some of those units, but it's still one unit. But it's just only one section of the building you have a high ceilings. The rest, ceilings are low. They're 9 feet, 8 feet, with this clear span. And it was built as an old silk mill, for sewing, lady sewing, sewing in a little a dye house sort of thing, for fabric.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One quick question, Mr. Attia. I hear the concept you're advancing. Do you know anywhere where this is being done successfully?
No, that's what I like to do. I do things that nobody else is doing. I think it's going to be a neat little niche that it offers a niche. My daughter just graduated from college, and she's living with us at home, and I'm glad. But it's something that I know what all their friends are talking about. They don't want to be home with mom.
So your target then are people that are just graduating from college?
Graduated. We're going to go after all the admissions to people that graduate and say, look, we got a place for your friends. They don't have to go rent a 1 or 2 bedroom place. And all these college graduate kids are here only. We are creating something special in Lehigh Valley. Somebody's copying me in Allentown. I read about this. Somebody's going to try to do the same thing, but I think it's a cool niche.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, any last questions from the board members? Any questions from members of the audience? Mr. Attia. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This is not. How long are we going?
And 10:30, maybe a little after if we think we have a chance. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yes. please.
Okay, I'm going to call Doug Frederick as my next witness. Doug, you've been here all evening, haven't you?
I have.
I believe you've been sworn.
I have.
Okay, then for the record, state your name, spell your last name, please.
Doug Frederick, Frederick.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a real estate broker.
And where do you hang your license? What's the name?
Howard Hanna, the Frederick Group. I own the company. We're affiliated with the third largest real estate company in the country, 13,000 agents, 350 offices in 9 states.
You're familiar with the project before the board this evening, is that correct?
I am.
You visited the site
I have.
and you're familiar with what's there now, the building that's there?
I am.
Well, let's start there we're going to do this in 2 pieces. We're going to talk first about what's there. In terms of the uses that would be viable, or what type of use could you make of that building in terms of marketing and leasing and operating that building?
So Abe asked me to come take a look at the building with the intention of commenting on who he could lease it to, different uses that he could put in there. And it's really an example of functional obsolescence. It's kind of a poster child for functional obsolescence. It's already been testified. Spaces on various different floors. They're not interconnected. The term of a forklift came up a few times. There's very few spaces in that building you can operate a forklift. It was ironic that while I was there, a prospective tenant came along in a similar business to other businesses in the park. It was in a wood molding business, and he needed to store pieces of moldings that were 13 feet long, and we couldn't find anywhere in the whole building to accommodate that use. As Abe said, there was one small section in the back of the building that had some close to 14-foot ceilings, but you couldn't get there. So Abe had suggested his idea to me. I thought it was a great idea. In addition to graduate students not having a place to go, and my experiences with economic boards in the area, trying to hold on to our young people, the problem is there's nowhere for them to live. And I shared with Abe, all of our housing stock is older or very expensive. Abe testified that there's no other place like this. There's some places, there's a strata apartments downtown, very expensive. There's a lot of different areas, but this was unique as a place where our graduates could live and be more likely to stay in the area and get employed. And I do a lot of work with corporations and the relocation departments. And the number one thing that corporations can't solve is where do they house resident employees that they hire. They hire Lutron, Vitalik, all these different companies. They hire 150, 200 people every year, and they hire them for a year or two. But there's nowhere for them to live. So the use really resonated with me a lot. I thought it made a lot of sense with its accessibility to a neighborhood. I thought it was, close enough to the area, and I felt that in looking at the other buildings from the outside, this particular building seemed to have an extreme case of functional obsolescence, more so than the outward appearance of the other buildings in the park. Although I've not been in, I was in one of them. I happened to lease the building to the units operator that's there. I was in that building. It's a nice building. But this is not that building. This was a tough building, and it seemed like individual apartments is something that you could fit into the space that's there. And as we know, the world changed. We don't have cigar rollers, we don't have garment factories, we don't have these types of businesses that park was built for, where employees came to work, they manufactured something, they stayed there all day. And that's not our commercial world today. Our commercial world is mostly distribution. People are moving things in and out a lot. It's not a site that you want to have a lot of moving things in and out. So I think that's another severely limiting factor on that park in general.
Okay, very good. And you don't see any problem then with leasing up the building as proposed by Mr. Attia?
Yeah, I think it would be a nice demand. You know, it's already been testified. You know, the Rose Garden, there's a lot of walking space in those neighborhoods. There's, you know, that's where the people are going to walk to. They're not going to walk around the industrial park. They're going to go back out 14th Street and walk around the neighborhoods if they're going to walk.
Very good. No further questions.
Attorney Rashidi. Attorney Fisher.
I do have a question. Mr. Frederick, when you're talking about walking spaces, what walking spaces are you talking about in the zone?
Well, the question was brought up, so I was just reflecting on previous testimony about the unwanted walking of residents of this building throughout the industrial park, and I don't think that would be the tendency. I think the tendency is that they would leave that area and go for walks in other areas.
Right, but they would be walking through the industrial zone.
Well, right. So as I said, this building is very close to the entrance. I think it's one building away from the 14th Avenue entrance. And so there'd be a very easy and quick exit. And it's just, kind of, I think, common sense. Where would people go? They would go back out 14th Avenue.
No further questions.
Thank you. Questions from the board? Thank you.
Can I just have 1 minute?
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, thank you for that.
Sure.
My next witness is the engineer for the project, Sue Kendall. You all know Sue. There's really not a whole lot more for her to testify to, but she can authenticate the drawings if necessary and answer any questions about the engineering drawing. So I'll just go down that, follow that narrow line if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Okay, Sue, again, you've been here since the beginning, correct?
Yes,
And you've been sworn?
yes.
Now, I want you to state your name, spell your name, please, for the record.
Sue Candle, SUEKANDIL.
What do you do for a living?
I am doing land development for over 20 years. I'm a professional engineer.
And you've testified as an expert before in civil engineering?
Yes,
You've testified in front of this board, I believe, as an
Yes.
expert in civil engineering?
yes.
Okay, I would just ask that she be allowed or accepted as an expert in civil engineering.
Any questions?
Without objection, that's fine.
Thank you. Sue, you are responsible for the engineer drawing of what we're calling the site plan, is that correct?
Yes,
You drew that?
yes.
Okay. You want to just tell us what's happening there in particular? If you don't mind stepping over there, I have a
Okay.
few questions for you.
Can she take the microphone with her though, please, Jim? Thank you.
Okay, Sue, one of the topics for consideration was, or that we're talking about, is the variance for there's a separation of a required separation between parking and the building. You familiar with that?
Yes.
And where is that area?
We have the area north of building B. It's a zero separation because it's not wide. The property is not wide enough to move the parking lot to be 15 feet from the building.
So let me ask you this, is that already parking there now?
No,
There's not parking there now?
it's a stone area, the car parking, but it's not like a striped.
It's not
parking.
striped?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. And how many spaces are in there? 15?
Have like 5 parking spaces, 0 separation.
Oh, that's all? Only 5?
5 at 0 separation, but I have at 13th Avenue.
Mhm.
It's like about 8 feet from the building. It's not 15.
Okay, so that's another area, right?
Yeah,
Are those existing parking spaces?
some of them.
Okay, well, show the board what we're talking about.
It's here. It's west of the building, building A. No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
It's not. It's public.
So, Sue, the only on-site spots that we're talking about are the 4 spots that are at the very top of your drawing, top right. Is that correct?
There is another area when the building, north of the building, there is an area like tipped in a little bit. It's like 3 feet only from the building. It's the handicap area. I think it's like 3 parking spot.
Okay, so that would be, if I'm looking at your drawing, at the building that's running horizontally, it's labeled 830 13th Avenue, and just above that, there's a blue parking area. Is
Yes,
that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
And those encroach within the required setback?
yes,
Is that correct? Okay. So it's the 4 that you identified earlier, and it's those blue ones?
yes.
Is that right? Are there any others on site?
On
That you're aware
side, no.
Okay, what is the, there was some talk earlier about an easement. Where's that easement?
The easement is running north of the building, existing building. It's 18 feet easement, access easement for the adjoining properties.
Okay,
And it show here, it's like hatch area. It's a recorded easement already.
okay, so it starts at 13th Avenue, is that correct?
Yes,
And it's that green dotted lines with hatching, and it runs across our property, the subject property, and it runs back onto an adjoining property, is that correct?
yes.
Now, you show that as 25 feet. Is it the intent to expand that paved area?
It's existing 18 feet, but we expand the driveway, not the easement.
Okay, but you're not going to do anything to encumber the existing 18 feet, is that correct?
For this purpose, no, we're not showing any
Okay.
change in the easement.
Okay. And you heard Mr., you heard Gene testify with respect to your drawing. You were here when he testified?
Yes,
And is there anything he said that in referencing your drawing that was not accurate?
no.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Can I just ask one question real quick? So we've been talking about spaces on the lot, off the lot. Is there 67, that number, that actually are on lot parking spaces?
Yes,
Okay, but your relief for the separation distance pertains to ones that are off the lot?
and no, I have couple on lot. It doesn't have the 15 feet separation.
Okay,
That was probably a poorly phrased question. Because
okay.
they are within 15 feet of the building, those public spaces.
But they're on the public
don't-
street.
Yeah.
That doesn't apply.
Yeah, they're referring to this here.
Okay,
but the
you know, I
lease
just want to ask the
here
zoning
also-
officer if the relief is needed for those spaces then. They're not, because they're not being counted in the 67, right?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Okay, Eric?
Yeah.
Attorney Rashidi?
You guys as zoning officer clarify that.
How many spots did you determine needed? Because her testimony was 4. I believe. Yes, her version was 11 or.
Let me try something if you don't
Hold
mind.
on, let's see if you can get the answer.
I believe it's a 9.
Oh, hold on. And if you didn't, I mean, I don't know that it was necessarily your job to determine that the exact number either. So if you don't know the answer, I don't know if you did do that. Mr. Piper.
I did not calculate the number in my notes from the planning commission letter nor
Okay.
in the advertisement.
Can we
Fair
just
enough.
continue
Ms.
for just
Candle.
a minute, if you don't mind?
Yep. Go ahead, Attorney Preston.
Can I continue with her for just a minute? Sue, yeah, you have another exhibit that you prepared, the parking exhibit. Would you put that up? Okay, let's mark that. Let's call that,
I mean, you just had to say they need
I think we're at
to
A10.
It's up to them to figure out.
And what is A10?
But if you did.
18, we're showing tractor trailer parking in the docks, the existing docks. And
No,
the houses.
wait, I didn't get that. It shows what?
It shows a tractor trailer parking to unload or load from the docks, existing docks, and there is two access to the dock here. We're showing how it will affect actually the access easement, because this area, I didn't measure it exactly, it's like 20 feet wide. If any truck come here and unload or load from the docks, it will block actually the access easement, because there is no space for the trucks to park.
Okay, Sue, so you're pointing to, you have the building and you've identified that loading dock, correct?
Yes,
Is that, and that's the only loading dock for the building, is that right?
yes,
If you don't mind me leading a little bit. That's what Gene had referred to when he talked about the loading dock, is that correct?
yes,
So you have a drawing that shows trucks backed up to the loading dock, is that correct?
yes,
Now, does it also show the parking on site?
yeah.
Okay.
That is a parking and that is the access easement. for
Okay,
the
now
neighbor.
I just want to use it for the parking, if I can. Can you identify the spots for which we need relief from the 15-foot separation requirement?
Okay, I have to come here in this side plan. I have two here and another three. That's zero separation from the building. That's north of building B. And I have the handicap here. 1, 2, 3. Another parking is like 3 feet from the building. And that's 3 and 5, that's 8.
So it's 8 spaces for which we
Yes.
need relief. Let's make sure of that. Take your time.
Let me count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes.
She has to count. She didn't count these.
She didn't count the side.
And Sue, what about the spaces that wrap around the corner on the west side?
No, this is meeting because the building is far 15 feet.
Can we have one person at a time? Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. If you count this, I count only this parking, but if you count 1, 2, 3, that's 11. It's 11, 1, 2, 3.
We're talking, you're exactly right.
And that's what Gene had testified to.
Yeah, he testified to 11.
All right, so it's actually 8 to the west and north of building B, and then the 3 handicap spots. That's how we got the 11 now.
Yes.
Okay.
They're not handicapped.
Well, 3 in the area of the handicap spots is what you
Right,
said.
yeah.
I think,
next to the building.
actually, I think he counted the next spot over because parking spots are normally about 9 feet wide. So
I see 3 only here in front of the bump of the building.
Okay.
North of the building, building A.
North of building A.
Yeah.
The others are to the west and north of building B.
Yeah,
So our final number is 11.
11, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, let me ask a question. The handicap spots, the one looking at this drawing, the one to the far left, if the red is the building outline,
Yes,
is that third spot then, again, moving over toward 14th Avenue, is that in compliance?
no, not the third handicap one. It's a 2 handicap and 1 regular. 1, 2, 3. At the bump area. It's here at the
Yeah,
bump
I'm-
area. I have only 1, 2, 3.
So going from right to left, the handicap,
Yeah,
is
1, 2,
is that also not in compliance? I'm looking at is the red the building outline?
Yeah, this one is not, it's comply because it's 15 feet from the.
So
building.
that is in compliance?
Yeah.
Okay.
the spots though that the L portion that go up to B, the 3 along that side that you counted, moving.
This 3, yeah.
Yeah. Can I point? Am I allowed to go up and point?
We can, but I'm going to try and get back to the attorneys before I have the board wing. But go
Okay.
ahead, Mr. Schneck.
Oh, I was just gonna say.
We'll go ahead.
Oh, okay. These three that you identified, that's about a 9-foot spot. So wouldn't these three also not be in compliance? Because they're only 10 feet away? This row?
Gene, can you hear what's being said?
Yes.
Okay.
I think what Mr. Schneck's saying is the second row away would be
Yeah,
non-compliant only because the first row, if it's 0, is only 9 feet wide.
I have like 2 feet. Yeah, it will be 2 and 9, that's 11. This is 2 spot 2.
And what do they need to be? 15?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, Attorney Raschuti, let's come back to you with your question.
Then when add more 3, at the 11, one more. So I will-
I
sorry.
just want to confirm some numbers here. So we have, and I'm going to point to the top here. Then how many spots? 1, 2. Tell how many spots are here.
3, 1, 2, 3.
Please use the mic, Mr.
Yeah.
Raschuti.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right. So we have 3 spots to the north of the building.
Yes,
Is that correct?
2 and 3.
And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots to the west of the building. We're calling
Building B.
Building B. Is
Is that correct?
that correct?
Yes,
Thank
And then we have 3 more to the north of Building A.
yeah. 2 handicap and 1 regular.
That would be a total of 12.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 and 5, that's 11.
14.
It's 14.
But I thought we said one of the handicaps was compliant because of the way the
Mhm.
building.
Except she
juts in.
said there it's 2 handicap and the regular that's next to the 2 handicap are the non-compliant. Am I correct, Ms. Cando?
Yes,
Handle, brother. Do any of these spots impact the easement?
no,
They are outside of the easement?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Fisher?
From an engineering thank you. From an engineering perspective, is there anything that requires the number of 67 units to be built as part of this building? Or try it another way if that question confuses you. From an engineering perspective, is there anything that prohibits only having 50 units in the
No.
building? Is there anything that would prohibit, from an engineering perspective, having only 30 units in that building?
No, from engineering.
Okay. And so far, and see if you agree with me, there are 67 spots on the lot, correct?
Yes,
14 we've now identified as being non-compliant, and therefore a variance is required, correct?
yes,
So that makes 53 that are in compliance right now.
yes.
If you'll trust me with my math, if there were 30 units there and each one had 1.75 parking spaces, that would be 52 parking spaces on the lot. Does that sound logical to you?
Yeah.
And so since there's nothing that prohibits the developer from having only 30 units that would not require a zoning variance for the parking, would you agree with me that the developer could be in compliance with the parking requirements if it was just limited to 30 parking spaces?
From the engineering point, yes,
Yes.
but I'm not sure about marketing and profitable and all of that. I'm not sure if it
Understand.
will be reasonable for him, feasible for him to only do 30 units.
Mr. Fisher, you said if it was limited to 30 parking spaces,
Yeah,
you meant 30 units.
Yes, if I misspoke, thank you for correcting me.
And it would be 53
Correct.
Because 52 and a half would round up, just so we're about, so it's
Didn't
clear.
claim to be a mathematical
problem.
genius, but I believe I'm within one spot,
Exactly.
one unit or another. Thank you. That's all
Yeah.
the questions I have.
Thank you. Attorney De Pasquale.
No questions.
Members of the board, since I rudely cut you off before.
Well, I hate to belabor the point, but I'm curious now.
Undeterred, obviously.
You hate to do it, but you will.
It will be fast. It will be very fast. So we're talking 67 units with 67 parking spots.
Yes,
Right. Are the 3 handicaps included in the 67?
yes.
So you'd have to have 3 handicap tenants.
It's required by the handicap ordinance to have
Yeah,
3.
so, but my point is, we may be even shorter than we thought.
Actually, one quick question. You have has this plan been seen by anybody in the city? You have the fire truck turning lane. Did anybody review that
I believe it was.
preliminarily?
I believe it was reviewed by the planning, like engineering department and the planning. They went already for planning. I wasn't attend at this time, but they went to planning commission to review this plan too.
Did they have any comments about the radiuses or fire
I'm-
truck access?
I'm not sure.
Anything else from members of the board? All right, Ms. Candle, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Eric, do you want to?
Let me see.
Let's stand first. Attorney
I'm
Preston,
going to recall Mr. Attia.
that's fine.
Okay, Abe, is there anything physically, just as a matter of just physics, that would prevent you from putting 30 units here?
No.
Is there anything that would keep you from just putting like one big unit there?
No.
Okay. How did we get 67?
Well, it's feasible financially to develop, when you develop a project, to be able to use the space professionally. And I've done factory conversions into apartments in the past. So it's, financially, you have to heat and cool, develop, approve it. So it's a level of borrowing the money, paying the property taxes, and making it financially feasible that a bank will finance the project for a particular niche project like this. It's a financially feasible to develop it this way. It's what we do.
Is that what drives the number?
Correct.
Feasibility?
Yes.
And there was a question about the planning commission. You were in front of the planning commission with this project, were you not?
I was.
And what happened?
They recommended favorably, it was 5-0 to approve this project for the studios. They love the idea.
For the use that we're showing
For
here?
this use was approved in front of the planning commission. It was recommended favorably 5-0. They voted in favor of this project to approve it for the studios. Yes.
Okay, nothing further.
Questions based on that? Board? Yeah. Okay. The rest?
Yeah, we rest, move for the admission of the
Submission.
exhibits.
No objection to the exhibits? Okay, so the exhibits, I think it was A1 through A10, am I correct?
10, yep.
Okay.
Okay, Attorney Raschuti, Fisher, and De Pasquale can you come up just a second, please?
You can go off the record.
Huh?
Jim, you can come up. It might go quicker without you, but.
Yeah.
Exactly. What do you got? The board usually goes 6 to 10 p.m. What do you got in terms of witnesses? Anything? How much time do you think?
I have one.
One, okay.
I have two.
Okay. That's gonna go well past 10.
Yeah,
right?
I think we're
All
gonna
right.
cut it off here then.
Yep. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So just give us another minute. We'll be back to you in 1 minute then. Yeah.
I'd like to cut it off now.
You want to stop now?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a good breaking point.
it's a good break.
They've got 3 or 4 total witnesses, so.
Okay. Let's see. Right.
What do we have on the
That's
December
what I'm
list?
saying. So what do we got?
No good. you're booked solid.
Okay.
The 11th is validity. The
How about just-
standard meeting on the 23rd is completely full.
Okay. Do we have a January date?
You have January 22nd.
Okay.
That's
we
a
It's the next-
contingency date?
That's their next regular meeting, or we can
Have we
push it up.
established a contingency date?
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
or we can push it up to,
I'm just wondering if we wouldn't be smarter to do a contingency date.
Yeah. Just finish it.
So that's the only thing we have.
that assumes your validity challenge finishes up on the 11th.
Yeah.
We can also use the contingency.
I get no response from them. Like, I threw that bomb at you,
It's just
so,
glazed over.
Contingency date.
it's the 8th of January, and then
millennium.
the regular meeting would be the 22nd of January.
These apartments will be built by far.
Which
now.
is the 8th, the
The
contingency.
8th, yeah, it's always the first one, that's the contingency, the 4th is the regular
So-
standing.
At the very earliest, we're looking at a January date.
Correct.
So we'll have to ascertain what that date is. what
It's
you're-
January 8th.
January
That's
8th
what you're
is?
saying, It is January 8th, right?
Correct.
Okay, I thought you said the validity
it?
challenge was still going on then. If it
No,
was,
no, no, I'm saying the validity challenge is on the 11th of December.
okay, so
If for
January
whatever
8th.
reason,
That's a
they don't
contingency date?
finish and the board pushes it yet another hearing,
Okay,
then they're looking at typically doing that on the 8th.
January is by
all
Wednesday.
right, all right. Gene, I'd like to go back on the record so we can, I'd like to cut off the hearing at this point, and I believe we're looking at January 8th to continue. Are you able to comment on that now?
Get another option. There's a lot of people here. I'll try, if I'm the only one who has. I'll figure it
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so we unfortunately have,
Yeah.
we already have 2 dates every month because of some other ongoing ones.
Yeah.
But we're always pretty flexible. It's just tough with these cases with everybody.
I said,
Can you do it?
I'll figure it.
You're a gentleman. Thank you.
And,
Remember that.
I do. You know.
okay, and members of the board, can you please get back to Craig on that? I think at this point, we're going to adjourn the meeting for this evening.
Yeah, just, so we'll, the official announcement so that we, in case we didn't re-advertise anything, is from tonight, we are rescheduling to January 8th at 6 PM in this same location. Okay?
All right.
6 o'clock. Yeah,
6 o'clock.
And this meeting is adjourned.
thank you.
Yeah, yeah.